friends. It's almost midnight, and you've found your way to the PikeCast. Come along as we careen through the catalog of the most formative horror writer of our young adult days, Christopher Pike. From adult perspectives, we'll revisit these YA books our parents probably would never have let us read had they known what lie inside. We tackle one book per episode in a freewheeling and unbiased chat. So grab your battered paperback, pull the flashlight from the kitchen drawer, climb under your bed covers, and devour a good book with us.
Greetings, fellow Pikers, and welcome to the PikeCast. I'm Cooper Beckett, and as always, I'm happy to be joined by my lovely co-hosts.
Hello, I'm Cassie.
Hi, I'm Becca.
Today, we are digging into Christopher Pike's 1988 novel, Gimme a Kiss. We're going to be breaking it down in great detail, spoiling each and every plot twist, so consider yourself warned. If you're enjoying the PikeCast, please leave us a review on the podcast service of your choice. This week, we welcome as our guest Piker a real loser. Co-host of Stephen King podcast, The Losers Club, and editor at the AV Club, Randall Colburn.
Hi.
Thank you, Cy, for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Cy. Or is it thank you, Cy?
We are very happy to have you here. And as we go into this, you'll see all the things I've cribbed from the Losers Club for organization purposes.
I'm glad that we could be some kind of positive influence.
So before we get going and dig into Gimme a Kiss, I have a few questions for you, our guest questions.
Yeah.
How did you discover Christopher Pike?
Oh man, it was sort of a process. I always liked horror, and I started with Goosebumps with R.L. Stine, and then I moved up to Fear Street, and point horror. I was like very, very obsessed with these kind of books like YA teen horror. I read every single one I could get my hands on. It started, I think, because they were in the the Scholastic book guides,
Oh yeah.
And when I was in elementary school, and so I started getting those, and then I moved up. I kind of, it was like a drug addict. You need something harder, and so I was like, oh man, I want, And then I think I started at the library. They would keep all the teen horror kind of on one of those little mobiles, and I would, and they had Christopher Pike books like right next to R.L. Stine books. So I eventually was just like, well, I should check one of these out. And then I was like, oh shit, like these are more intense. And I was probably a little too young to be reading them, although I imagine most of us were when we started reading them, which is what made them fun. And so I read, oh man, I think like every Pike I could get my hand on. The thing is, like, it's not like King where the books are so individual. Like they don't, like King books for me at least don't bleed together. Like they're all, they're sort of, they're also different in their own ways. Whereas like, Pike books, and I think a lot of YA teen horror, it's like, they traffic in a lot of the same tropes. They obviously distinguish themselves from one another, but, there was only, when I was kind of revisiting the list, I was more reminded of things by covers than I was titles. And so that was actually really helpful to me. Like when you said, what book do you want to chat about? I was like, I looked at all the titles and I'm like, I don't remember what any of these are about. But then when I looked at the covers, I was like, oh yeah, like, and because the covers were the things that, I don't know, because I had all the original paperbacks and, or at least I got them from the library. I owned a handful of them. But it's like, for me, like, Monster is like an iconic cover with the red eyes. And so I remembered them that way. And, so it was, and then eventually Pike sort of helped me graduate to Michael Crichton and then like Stephen King, and I was reading those guys. And I never really went back to Pike, although I still, have a very strong fondness for it. I wrote a piece for the AV Club last year about R.L. Stine, and I initially wanted it to encompass both Stine and Pike, but it was pegged to the, I think like the 30th or 40th anniversary, I think 30th, of like R.L. Stine's first like horror book. And I wanted to like weave in more Pike stuff. And it's funny because whenever you talk about R.L. Stine, like the Pike fans come out, and they're just like, why don't you talk about Christopher Pike? I'm like, I want to, I love him. So I was on like on the comments on AV Club, like on Facebook, all these people were like, "Where's Pike? Where's Pike?" I'm like, I will write a Christopher Pike piece one day, I promise. So, very fond memories. Although I have like mild trauma related to it.
Oh, do tell.
Well, only because like my parents were like big, they didn't like me reading all the time, and that's all I wanted to do. My dad was a big jock and he wanted me to play sports and stuff. And so, and I did play sports, but I would much rather have been reading books all day. And I remember one time I was really taken by a passage. I think it was in Monster. It was really gross, but I just thought it was cool. And I wanted to like share something with him. So I like read him the part, and then he was like disgusted, and he was like, why are you reading this? Like, and he would call them blood and guts books. And he wasn't like he wasn't like, morally conservative in any way, but like that wasn't the objection. It was more just like, are you twisted? Like, what's wrong with you? And like, are you a little freak? And then and so I remember he would like give me shit all the time. And like whenever I was doing something he didn't like, he'd be like, he's like, why don't you do that or why don't you do this instead of reading blood and guts books? And he would always say blood and guts books. And then of course now I've like made something of a career out of my love for blood and guts books. So
you showed him.
I know, it's so funny. And like, obviously he's never really like come around necessarily, but I like have like, I don't know, like I meet people who like bonded over books with their parents and stuff. And I like get so jealous because like, I basically had to like hide that I was reading, like I would say I was going to go play basketball and I would go sit, like in a park and just read because that's all I wanted to do. And so mild trauma, but overall very fond memories.
My parents are big readers, but they hate horror.
Oh, okay.
So it was always that was the conflict, not the reading, just the why are you reading that?
Yeah,
you could be reading this. And it like my father said he read The Shining when it came out, and it bothered him so much that he never read another Stephen King.
It is very
until
disturbing.
Actually I got him to read Hearts in Atlantis.
Oh, nice! And
it reinvigorated his liberal hippie spirit.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, it was really cool. And then he was apolitical before that. And then that just brought him back to, man, remember Bobby Kennedy?
I love it.
Okay, next question. What is the thing, do you think, that keeps Pike on your mind? Even though you said, as which is true, that his books tend to blend together. What is it that keeps him in our minds?
I think it was I think for me, it's just, I read these books like at the right age, like in terms of they really imprinted on my brain because I hadn't encountered a lot of these themes before. And I think a lot of it had to do with sexuality, which is why it's interesting that we're reading this book today. I think, again, I wasn't raised in like a morally conservative household, but sex was sort of not something that we discussed ever. There was a lot of like, I think, shyness on my parents' part in terms when it came to sexuality and things of that nature. And I think it was when I started, when I read R.L. Stine, like people would kiss and stuff. But when I read Pike, like these kids are having sex and shit. And so it was like, that was very new to me. I wasn't really reading anything where people were boning. And that was, I think, very formative for me just in terms of like understanding how, what sex looked like as a teenager, because I was reading these when I was probably like between, I don't know, like 11, 12, like 13. And so it was eye-opening for me in that sense. I think he writes about sex in sort of a very broad, like I'm curious to hear like sort of because you guys have been reading these like with fresh eyes. And once we start talking about how sexuality is framed in this book, like how you'd measure that against the other ones you've read. Because like for me, I remember there just being sort of like an unabashed sexuality, or at least, like there wasn't, like in this book explores the concept of shame around sex, which I find interesting. But I think in a lot of the books, at least from what I remember, and I could be wrong, I didn't remember detecting a lot of shame around it. And that was, I think like just living in a conservative, not in a household, but in just a conservative world, like a very prudish world. I was, I was kind of I linked shame and sexuality in a lot of ways in my head,
Sure.
just because I think society does that to people, especially when they're young. I mean, I think that's changing now, but when I was a kid, at least. And so, so I remember feeling liberated by that, but also it was just like, I think I also like the ensemble nature of the books, just to pivot, because like I always was into ensembles, and I felt like he, especially like the Final Friends series, like he had such like a really captivating ensembles in those books where there was all these various characters, and that's a turnoff for some, but I really enjoyed that. I liked sort of tracking all these different narrative threads and everything. So.
And to speak to your question, as we've been reading the Pike books, we're noticing it's like there's a schizophrenic nature to the sexuality, where it sort of feels like, I mean, this is just my interpretation, that Pike is liberal when it comes to that, but he's also putting things in to please his editors and publisher.
Yeah.
That are moralizing about the sex. So there is sex and he doesn't have a problem with it, but also there's consequences because there has to be consequences.
Yep.
And so it's been very interesting, but yeah, there is a lot of sex in these. And what's funny for me is I went from reading, point horror, to Pike to It.
Oh, wow.
Within a year and a half, I think. So my view of sexuality and violence in fiction, just exploded when I was 10.
I love it.
It was wild. It was really wild. Okay, last question.
Yeah.
If you had to pick, what would you say your favorite Pike book is?
I guess I'd probably say Monster. That to me was one of the first ones I read, and it was the first one of his that I owned. I didn't own a ton of books because I didn't have money, and I would just usually go to the library. But Monster was one that my mom bought me at the grocery store, I remember, which was like that was a big treat, somebody would buy me a book, and so I owned Monster, so I remember reading it like 4 or 5 times. Like I just, because the books that I owned, I would read over and over again. And so I remember that one pretty vividly. And I remember it being like really genuinely shocking. Like, isn't there a shooting at like a party in that?
Yeah. It opens with a party shooting.
That was so disturbing to me, but in ways that, I think for some you're disturbed and then you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to read this anymore. For me, if I was disturbed, I was like more. So I was very much like a gore hound when I was a kid, especially because I couldn't watch it. I didn't watch horror movies when I was young. I didn't like to see it, but I loved to read about it. So I used to just sit in my grandma's, I've talked about this in the King pod, but I used to just like, before I ever read King, I would sit in her basement and she had a couple Stephen King books like Christine and The Shining, and I would flip through them and just try to find the gory parts. And then I did I think with Pike, it was a similar sensation. I would reach those really gory parts, and there were a lot, like because there's like cannibalism and monsters in there, and
blood everywhere, cannibalism. What was your favorite, Becca? It was like intestines or something.
Yeah,
sliding down the wall.
Yeah, somebody's intestine. Tom Troy. I don't know his name. Somebody's intestines was decided to go down the wall.
Yeah, at that party, they just slid down the wall. Yeah,
loved it.
Yeah,
it was so gory.
I ate that stuff up, but it was. But yeah, Monster was the one I think that stands out, and I think it also played with archetypes in ways that were interesting. Like I was always interested. I wasn't a jock or anything. I was a pretty nondescript, just like bookworm when I was in school. But I was always fascinated by people who actually did sort of like align with certain, archetypes / stereotypes, like prom queen or football player or chess nerd, like various things like that. And so whenever books sort of played with those, like because I always remember Monster because the cover had like the All-American football guy on the cover.
Yeah.
And that's just an archetype that has like stuck with me, even though I wasn't that kind of person. Like I'm also a playwright, and I've written a couple plays, and I love to toy with sort of like all American jock characters and toy with that, because to me it's like we have certain ideas that we associate with those kinds of people, and I always love stories that toyed with it or took the archetype and sort of twisted it. And King does that too a lot in his books. I mean, especially with like the bully, like that's one of my favorite archetypes. It's like the bully, and that's one of the things I love about King is he toys with that. Whereas I think like Pike really did so with sort of like the beautiful people, right? Like he tends to write
cheerleaders.
Yeah, cheerleaders. Yeah. And Stein did that too, but like toying with the archetypes of like cheerleaders, prom queens, football players, things of that nature to me was always really interesting because, it was I never felt like I fit into any kind of role. So I was always kind of fascinated by people who, embodied any kind of archetype. So
absolutely. Okay, let's move into our first section, Magic Fire, and have Cassie give us the back of the book for Gimme a Kiss.
Okay. Some secrets are worth dying for. Jane Retton would never let anyone read her diary. After all, it was filled with her wildest secrets, the sort of things she wouldn't even tell her closest friends. Then something terrible happened. Somehow her diary ended up at school, and soon everyone was reading her final, shocking entry. Some girls would simply die. Other girls would kill. But Jane Retton, she would do both. Dun, dun, dun.
That is actually the rare accurate description for the book.
Agreed, yeah.
Do you find that a lot of them don't align with the actual book?
Oh, well, they're like the worst offender is Midnight Club.
Ugh.
Which implies monsters and murder, and there's none of that. But usually, they've had the wrong names. They've been just flagrantly misleading. So it's always a challenge. If you're picking this up, it's good that teenagers aren't discerning. Or younger than teenagers, preteens. Now let's talk about the artwork. The original artwork is the ship with the well-dressed preppy girl falling into the water.
She's like raising the roof. She's like, woo.
Do you guys get like, when I looked at this cover for the first time, I was like, is this going to be like mythology, like Poseidon? Will he show up? And I was kind of like hoping.
Oh, I could see that.
Yeah, like it definitely gives me like the, yeah, you know what I'm saying.
I know, yeah, we're with you. But I mean, for a change, both the back of the book text and the artwork on the cover pretty reasonably accurately tracks with what's in the book.
Yeah. I chose this based on the artwork because I was like, I didn't remember, a lot of the books that were still available. I was like, I don't really remember like the plots of these, but I had like a vague spark when I saw the girl in the water, and so I figured. And also, I tend to like water horror, although this isn't really water horror, but you know what I mean?
No.
So I think I just like instinctually went with that one. And, but it was fun because as I was reading it, it was fun because it's been 25 years or something probably since I read this. And it's fun to think about, it was fun when little pricks of like memory would pop up. And I'm just like, oh my God, I remember like certain aspects of it. But that's how I felt when I saw the cover. I was like, I definitely remember reading this one,
Yeah. Okay. Let's head to the Midnight Club and talk about our characters. Let's start with Jane Retton. Jane is our hero, our villain. It's all very ambiguous here. She is 17, and she qualifies, according to herself, as something of a book person.
I'm quite the fan. She's very, I like her snarkiness. Like, I have a couple of quotes here. Where she really stood out to me, which one of them she's talking to Patty, and she's like, Patty goes, his bones. The girl catches on quick. I like my fish raw. And then she responds, fish are smarter than most people think. They can usually smell where the water's polluted, where everyone's been dumping garbage. They know to stay away from such places. And it's just like, she's done that. There's another line somewhere where like her snark really stood out to me, and I was like, okay, I can get behind this.
Well, that fish line was also kind of weird.
It was.
It's so slut shamey though. Like the whole
That's
time, I'm
true.
like, why is she so slut shamey? Like
Mhm.
everybody who has sex more than her, Jane's like, you're worse than me, and I'm like, dude, bitch, just get out there and have some fun. What are you doing? Like, why are you so miserable
She's
that everybody
writing about the sex that she
Right.
wants to be having.
Yeah,
It's bizarre.
It's definitely slut shamey, but she's definitely quick on her feet with the comebacks.
She is. Yeah, she is. I think toward the end too, she was like, "Oh, you're a dumb broad" to one of the other girls, and I was just like, "Dang."
Yes, you dumb broad. I mean, that's just out of nowhere. That's like, there's that Pike noir that's coming in to play. You dumb broad.
Yeah, I think for me, like the slut shamey stuff, it resonated as sort of like born from jealousy, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I think that, and I think that that's really true for a lot of people. Is like the sexually frustrated people, especially when you're young, and you're obviously told when you're young, or at least in the 80s and the 90s. You were often told by people when you were young that sex is something that, you got to wait. It's got to be special. It's got to save it till marriage. Like people who don't do that are bad. And they toy with those themes in the book. So I think that, people struggle with, and I saw that in Jane, who I found to be interesting because she's such like a flawed character.
Yeah.
And, but I think that, for me, those moments of like slut shaminess, it just comes from the sense that, she's fantasizing about, sleeping with her boyfriend in her diary, but she's, too torn between, various modes of awkwardness and shame, and also like nervousness and all these things, like to actually go through with it. And so the people that have, there's this sense of resentment because, what are they doing that I'm not? And so, but yeah, I like Jane because, well, in a lot of these YA books, the main characters are usually just kind of like, vessels, right? They're kind of blank vessels, people who are, somewhat popular, good looking, but maybe not always getting the girl or the guy. And they're usually like pretty good people. And they're not the ones who are necessarily like setting the events into action. Like things tend to happen to them and they get swept up in something. And so I liked her in the sense that, we learned from the beginning that she is somebody who lives vicariously, and also like, is creating sort of false narratives for herself and applying false identities to herself because she wants to be all these things that she's not. And then I think the fact that, our ostensible main character is the one who devises sort of the scheme that ends up with a lot of people getting killed. Like, even though she's not the quote unquote villain, she is in many ways, what's the word I'm looking for? Culpable for the bad things that are happening. And
when she literally does kill Sharon.
Yeah. Which is so dark. Like that was like,
it is
pitch black, man. And so like, yeah, so I guess that's what I dug about her was she is this very, very, not perfect, very flawed, very psychologically distressed character that is sort of our entrance into this world, which I feel like is, again, I haven't read Pike in a long time, so I don't know. I'm not sure if that's like was common with his main characters, but I do feel like, I don't know, when I think about like the last vampire series or Monster, he did like to frame sort of the POV through the lens of maybe the most monstrous person of all, maybe, so.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the classic example of the flawed hero is Die Softly with Perv Herb, who's trying to photograph naked girls.
Oh, yeah, that book. Is that the one with the cocaine?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, man.
They take
let's be clear.
Everywhere.
They all have cocaine in them.
Die Softly.
That one had all the cocaine.
Yeah, Die Softly fucked me up, man. Like when I was a kid, because I didn't know what cocaine was. And I like asked my parents, and they were like, "Why are you asking?" And then, I was like, "Does it kill you?" And like and I think they told me, but they were like, "Don't read stuff." And then, but I just remember, like, yeah, does she like ODs him on cocaine at the end, right?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's fucked up.
It is. Well, what's interesting about Jane is I got a lot of that. You know how you can tell when the author is putting themselves in a character?
Mm-hmm.
I really felt that with Jane. She worked at the school paper and wrote a snarky, critical essay about the football team and the cheerleaders.
Yeah.
And we know, based on our research here, that Pike really seems to have it out for cheerleaders.
Who broke his heart?
I mean, yeah. I mean, he definitely has a problem with women who want to be models, who are blonde, who want to go to California, who are cheerleaders.
Ugh.
Those are almost routinely vilified in these books.
Yeah.
It was interesting, that whole sort of side plot, the articles for the paper. And one of the things I liked about that is it mentions just offhand that she'd written an article about why conservative groups are allowed to remove books from the library.
Yeah.
And that hit home a lot, because you know that conservative groups were probably trying to get Christopher Pike's books removed from the libraries of schools at this point, because we're now 3 years into his writing career, and you know he along with all the other point horrors, were all over school libraries at this point. Yep. Also, she knows a lot about scuba diving, and you can always tell in the Pike books when he knows a lot about something, because literally on her back was a 71.2 cubic foot, 2,250 psi tank. From experience, she knew the air would last approximately 40 minutes at this depth. Like there's these moments where it's like, okay, Pike, we get it.
Yeah,
you know what you're talking about. Okay.
I love that some of the themes pop up in different ones. Like, this isn't the only book with a really big emphasis on scuba diving that he's done, and every time I'm like, I'm pretty sure all of the scuba knowledge I've learned has been from Christopher Pike books.
So we've learned about abortions from Pike, cocaine from Pike, scuba diving from Pike.
Oh, man.
Photography. How to develop pictures.
Yeah, developing.
So many things. McDonald's.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
I don't know if we learn, but we just get hungry.
I've got that for our McDonald's section.
Love it.
While we're talking about Jane, her list of ways to get back at them
that made me genuinely laugh out loud.
It's just delightful. Number 1, kill P and K. Number 2, cripple K. Number 3, disfigure P. Number 4, infect P and K with an incurable disease.
That was my favorite.
And that's going to come back in our problematic section. And number 5, disgrace P and K. I love it.
It's so funny, but also, like, I laughed and I was like, this is absurd. But then, I don't know. I mean, obviously, like, it is inflated, but you know, I do always love sort of the thing I find funny about when you're writing teenagers or you're reading about teenagers, and you know, I see this with my nieces and nephews and stuff, is like, you know, everything, the stakes are so high all the time, you know, which I totally remember. And it's like the idea of like injecting somebody with an incurable disease. When I read that, I laughed because I'm just like, I probably felt that way about people when I was in high school.
Oh yeah. I remember being in the, you know, that's the thing. Christopher Pike speaks to me because all of his broken, horny heroes are right there where I was at 11, 12, 13 years old.
Absolutely.
But would you guys have taken the time to write out that list? Like, wouldn't you have thought better than doing that? Like, can you imagine? And then she rips it up immediately after. Girl, why did you waste the ink and paper?
She has to write things down.
You don't write your list down, Cassie?
I write my list down, but not when they involve murder. Those ones are just for my head.
Did anyone find like real descriptions of Jane? Like, she describes everyone else, and some of them very detailed, but I couldn't find much of anything except that she's a brunette.
Yeah,
I don't remember. I think a lot of his protagonists, when they're girls, they just meld into this thin, big-nosed, like, blank canvas. You know,
I didn't notice a nose thing in this.
No, he didn't. So I just assumed she had a nose that was a shade too large.
That's reasonable.
Wait, hold on. I'm like running back to the prologue when they first described and I have something to say. Maybe I can say that for the problematic section, but the general way that he describes physical appearances. Oh no, he says Sharon had a big smile, but I feel like there was a nose at some point. That's like ringing a bell for me. But yeah, Jane, there's not a lot of physical description, just intense is like how she was described by Alice. And yeah.
I kind of feel like she's like Tracy Flick from Election, Reese Witherspoon's role. Really intense, and also kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But generic, so our readers can put themselves into the role.
Right.
Let's move on to Alice Palmer, who does have descriptions.
Lots of them.
Shapely red mouth, long black hair.
Very pale.
Spent a lot of time outdoors, but never seemed to tan.
Yes.
Owned a Jaguar.
She fancy.
She is. She also has herpes.
Yeah.
And they make a big deal out of this. Not at the beginning, where Jane is being real sweet about, hey, you should take some Blistex to put on your cold sore. But it becomes a big deal, and that's going to be in our problematic section. But there's that. I think that's why they mentioned the shapely red mouth.
Yeah, there was something like about Alice, just the way she's written is, I don't know, like there's not a lot of depth to that character, obviously. Like, I feel like with Jane, I at least got a better sense of her. And even maybe with like Sharon a little bit too, like I got like some sense of these people. I mean, especially through just the dialogue and the way that they engage with each other. But yeah, like Alice just very much feels like a soap opera character, like she's always kind of like shrilly and declaring and crying and there's like which works when she's sort of outed as the bad guy. Like there's just very much like in the final moments of it, she's very much like black cape, twirly mustache kind of thing. So.
Well, if there's nothing else we've learned from Pike so far, it's that he loves the reveal of the villain that's been among you all the time.
Yes, that's very true.
I love the reveals. I know.
I know. That's Cassie's jam right there.
I'm so here for it when they monologue at the end.
Yeah, it's very satisfying.
It is. Oh.
I find it interesting that Alice is our wraparound character. And there's a moment where our Lieutenant Fisher says, Alex, once he had gotten her going, Alice had talked freely, requiring little prodding. Her memory for details was remarkable. She could recount whole portions of conversations, which is especially interesting because she routinely recounts things that happened that she had no knowledge of whatsoever. Which is the problem of having a side character be your gateway character.
Yeah, the whole structure of this book is really odd, like I thought a lot about structurally how this book unfolds and how, I very much thought like if Alice is going to be the wraparound character, like if we're beginning it and the thing with her, I'm like, okay, well, we're going to get flashbacks from her perspective. So the idea that the flashbacks are all from the perspective of another character entirely is just really strange.
We assume is dead.
Yeah.
At that point, yeah.
Right. Yeah, that was really strange to me. And but I don't know. I feel like maybe he started it and then kind of wrote himself into this thing, and he's like, my deadline's coming up, like.
Well, I feel like when you have to write quickly, that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But what is interesting to me is this does have almost an identical plot structure to Die Softly.
Oh, interesting.
Which also opens the day after, recounting to a cop things that happened, and 2/3 of the way through, that structure ends, and the rest of the book happens. Both times here.
It's like one of his favorite things too, because it also happens in two of my other favorite ones that we haven't done yet, like a very similar structure. And I love it. I'm so excited. I want to read them. Yeah.
It's so much fun watching them catch up to like present moment.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it is always fun too when you like know who dies at the beginning, and you're like, in a weird way, it like would help me like latch onto characters a little bit more, like because I'd be like, oh, this is the person who burns alive, Yeah,
and, I'm like, oh, this is the dead girl.
Yeah, and I'm like, how do they get there?
I do want to highlight one moment from Alice where she's so irritated with Sharon that she says, I think it would be best if you didn't speak for the next 5 minutes.
I love that. I highlighted that. That's my favorite. I'm going to start doing that.
And then Sharon's like,
It's
can I
so
talk now?
Good. So we'll get more into Alice when we talk about the antagonist part, because she's sort of the antagonist here. But for now, let's move on to Sharon Less, who is just this vast stew of different character traits.
Yeah.
She's the airhead. She's a sex maniac.
She's so cute.
She's the one who eats. She's sweet. Like, all these traits that he gives her seem like the things he'd give the villain, but she's also Jane's best friend.
I absolutely
And doesn't
love
she have
it.
like punk? Doesn't she have like punk hair?
Yeah,
She got it,
yeah.
short.
Short brunette, and could be mistaken for an undernourished guy.
Yeah, that was a weird line.
Gosh.
But it's such an interesting collection of character traits. It's almost like there were 3 more characters in this book, and he combined all of them into Sharon.
Yeah. I thought she was funny. Like, I enjoyed her as sort of a side character. I felt like, I would say like one of my favorite parts of the book, honestly, was like the banter between her and Jane. Like, I really got like, oh, these people are friends. Like, that actually really resonated for me, which doesn't always when, you're reading these kind of books. Like, a lot of times they're just kind of like, okay, well, these people need to be friends for the sake of the plot. But there was kind of a shorthand that existed between them in terms of their sense of humor and the way that they needled each other, the way they got on each other's nerves. Like, that kind of stuff to me was successful.
I liked her too, and I was disappointed because she does sort of get lost in the narrative.
Yeah.
And then when she does show up again, she's been brained with a fire poker. So it's like, oh, okay, I guess that's what we get for Sharon. That's just her.
Yeah, just like a sad death, really depressing. Like there's not a lot of murder in this book, comparatively at least, I think for Pike. But yeah, I think like just the idea of like getting brained with a poker and like slowly kind of like, being in and out of consciousness as the house burns down and then being left to burn alive by your best friend. I was like,
oh my God,
shit.
It's so dark.
Yeah. Which is what I always liked about Pike. It's like, I like that he would go there. Like, cause that's what was always memorable to me. Like however many years later, I remember the cocaine death and Die Softly because I'm just like, God, that's so mean.
So Sharon is also the eater, because there's always a big eater in Pike.
Cooper loves that, don't you, Cooper?
And I am a fan of women who can put it away.
So did anybody else get the idea while reading that she had an eating disorder?
I did not.
Because
she is very skinny, yeah.
She is, and then they talk about how much she eats, and immediately after she eats, she goes to the bathroom and is in there for like 15 minutes.
I didn't recognize
me
that.
Neither.
Yeah.
I don't pick up.
Yeah, I saw that and I was like, oh, are they going to go into like, does she have bulimia? Like, is this a thing? And then they never went back to it. And they didn't explain why she was in there for so long, other than like a quick mention of, oh, she looked at the book too, but didn't touch it.
Yeah. I mean, they do mention that she has a hyperactive thyroid, but that could just be what she's saying.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting because it makes me wonder too about like the tight deadlines, obviously, like he was working under, because it makes me just feel like maybe when he's in the early pages of these books, he's sort of like throwing out character traits. Like maybe in his mind, he did have a place to explore her eating disorder, but the deadline crept up and he's like, can't do it. And so, but then he doesn't go back and delete that part. But so it's kind of just there for us to sort of like muse over. But I find that interesting because I imagine that, when you are working on that kind of deadline and you're mapping out your book sort of in those early pages, and then you're probably doing that sprint to the end, right? To make the deadline.
Absolutely.
And you're like forgetting certain things that maybe you set up. I don't know. I find that super interesting.
I don't know, because I know with the abortion one, we weren't sure too if the editors were making him do it. So I didn't know if maybe he did put something in there, but they were like, we don't want a bunch of teen girls reading this graphic scene of a girl throwing up her donuts. So let's move on or something. Yeah. But it's just, I don't know. I wasn't sure if anybody else read that or if I was just like seeing too much into it.
I didn't get that, but I totally see it.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
I think as a rule on Losers Club, I think we always say it's like there's no such thing as overanalyzing, because it's fun. It's like I think it, I mean, I'm very much in the school of once the book is out of the author's hands, it's like in ours now, and so we are going to put our own meaning on these things. And so and especially like in retrospect, when you're viewing things 30 years later or whatever, a lot of times you are maybe seeing things where there were seeds, but they didn't have the means or the understanding to really dig deeper. And so I think that's on us as like the modern reader to explore, was that something they were trying to do or not? And even if it wasn't, the fact that it's like ringing bells for us says something.
Yeah.
And until we can get Pike lured out of his bunker, we're not going to find out the answers to some of these things.
That would be amazing if you got him. Yeah,
we are working on him.
We have contented ourselves to the fact that Stephen King is never going to do our podcast.
Maybe one day.
Yeah, he's a long shot.
Yeah, he basically does interviews with like 2 people. So
never give up, never surrender. You never know.
Oh, we won't.
Yeah, exactly.
We came this close to getting Joe Hill, and we might still in the future. But yeah, that's probably.
Well, if you could get Joe, you could probably get King.
We put a good word in with your dad.
Yeah, we get Joe, and we spend the whole time just like telling him to get his dad.
So
on
could
the
you
pod.
talk to your dad for us? It's like, I want to talk about my book.
All right, talk about your book for a few minutes, and then let's talk about how we can get your dad on the pod.
And then you just point out all the references to King's books in Joe Hill's books.
What do you think about it? Like, just talk to me about it.
You're basically becoming Chris Farley.
I know, right?
Remember in It when they beat Pennywise? That was awesome.
That is something I probably would absolutely do.
Me too.
Fun side story, just tangent while we're talking about interviews. I got to
we love tangents. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, trust me, if you've listened to Loser Club, you know we do too. But I actually got to interview one of my favorite actors this past week, and the interview's going up, I think, like early December, and it's Crispin Glover from Back to the Future.
Awesome.
Yeah, he's like, I've loved him since I was a kid. Back to the Future is my favorite movie, and but I love like all of the weird shit he does. And did
you ask him about his dance in Friday the 13th?
No, I should have. He's very touchy about like certain things. Like they even said before I interviewed, they're like, no Back to the Future questions, so which is fine, I get it. But it's like, but I mainly wanted to talk to him about like the weird. He makes these weird movies on his own that are just really strange that he tours with, and he was really happy I wanted to talk about those. But I had a moment where I was like, where we were talking about a specific screening that I went to that he was at, and he was talking about it, and I like almost started being like, remember at that screening when you did this? And then I had to stop myself. I was like, stop. I'm like, I have 20 minutes.
I feel like that would be all of our Pike conversations.
Yes. Anyways, fun side story.
So back to Sharon. Her parents own a cabin in those hills. She reads Playgirl.
I forgot about that.
I have never in my life met a woman who reads Playgirl. I've met women who enjoy a lot of porn and sex and stuff, but never, ever have I met someone who reads Playgirl.
Yeah.
And unless you just said I read Playgirl, Cassie, I didn't.
No, I just Googled what it is. I didn't know that was a thing.
Oh yeah, it's it's Playboy for girls.
Oh my God.
Except it's not, an actually legitimate magazine as well.
I was going to say, do all the pitches that get turned down by Playboy, they just go, publish it at Playgirl.
Yeah. When they show you the byline, they just put their thumb over the girl part, and you just assume it's Playboy. Oh, you had one in Playboy. Wow.
Is it just naked guys?
Yeah.
Oh.
Pretty much.
Huh. Okay.
It's a lot of sausage, Cassie.
That's not. I don't think that. I don't think that that's.
And okay, so this is going to be my question for our listeners this week. Have you or anyone you know ever actually sat down to read a Playgirl? I mean, you can talk about it using it as porn, but I'm curious about reading Playgirl because I have read Playboy. And I know a lot of people who've read Playboy, but Playgirl is not that kind of magazine. I do want to mention before we move off, Sharon she does have a moment where she suggests drowning the rah-rahs this weekend. So out of nowhere, Sharon just suggests, let's kill some cheerleaders. It's great.
Who hurt
I
you,
love
Christopher Pike?
She is my favorite character in the book.
Yeah, she's
without
fun.
question. Let's move on to the, quote, love interest. Dumbass Kirk, Donner.
Aw.
Gosh.
And I say dumbass because literally, like, okay, I have a problem with their relationship for many reasons, but specifically, Jane is trying to educate him with literature. And when he doesn't take to it, she starts giving him kidlit. So, like, she's feeding him stories she read when she was in 6th grade. He honestly appeared to be enjoying them. It's like he's a project, not a boyfriend.
I do love her giving him Narnia.
Yeah, but specifically, I have a new Narnia chronicle for you.
New.
Who says that?
I know, that made me laugh.
A Narnia chronicle.
I love,
And then talks about Aslan and his powers.
Yes. I love big dumb hunks in books, and so he definitely
So
fit
does
that
Pike.
mold. Yes, I love like these big dumb boys who are basically just like, you know, various playthings for the girls. It's very charming. So yeah, Kirk,
Well, he
not a lot of substance.
according to this,
yeah.
oh yeah, not a lot of substance at all. He often drank when he was bored.
Yeah, that was a weird detail about him.
It is. But he's one of many. This is another reoccurring thing in Pike. There's sex, there's violence, and there's just a whole lot of just casual drinking among teenagers. It's not even a big deal. No one even is surprised by it. It's just, oh yeah, he buys a beer and a pizza and a 6-pack on weekends. It's like,
Yeah, that's always really funny to me. Like, I don't know, and I say this when I watch, like, you know, regular movies and shows too, like even like prestige stuff, that like everybody gets boozed so easy. Like, I think Superbad was like one of the only movies where I was like, oh yeah, that's like my high school. Like we had to fucking like work our ass off to find someone to buy us beer. And so, and it was a big deal when you did get like some beer to drink. Like it was, for me and my friends, it was like really rare. And so that we actually pulled it off and did that. And so whenever there's like casual drinking amongst teens and like anything, like I was watching the Hulu show A Teacher, which is like, you know, very haughty prestige series. And, but even then there's like this teen party and like, there's like 8 kegs, and I'm just kind of like, what high school is this? Like, if we got one keg that we could scrape together our money to buy and find someone to do it, that thing was gone by 9:30. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, but it's easy in Pike World. It's
jealous.
Really easy. Kirk was, in his own words, a perpetual goof off.
Anyone who says that about themselves is not to be trusted.
No. He tossed a frisbee on the beach for hours. He eats when he gets hungry. He swims when he gets hot.
Don't we all eat when we get hungry? Why is that specific to Kirk?
It's like, I mean, what I do like about it is it does come down to the hero worship thing, because Jane is so enamored with him that everything he does is just so cool.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting, he has resting angry face. Kirk's mouth almost demanded that he smile. Otherwise, wearing a relaxed expression, he looked angry. But making him laugh always came easy for Jane. She just had to tell him how neat he was.
I can't hang with these girls and their mediocre redwood men. Like he is the most boring, bland, like Quaker oatmeal.
Yeah.
It's so basic. And they don't even, their relationship, like what even is it? Like what's even happening? Neither one of them even, he doesn't seem to like her, but then he's like, come here, babe, let me give you a smooch.
Yeah.
Like what? Gross.
And he just kind of half-ass doesn't deny that they had sex, like because he doesn't understand the question.
He's dumb, dude.
I mean, is he really that dumb, or is he just gaslighting Jane?
It's so confusing too, because then he's like, well, I didn't want to make it seem like you were lying. So like, did he think he was protecting her somehow? Like, what?
I have no idea if he wants to be in a relationship. Like, the whole time I was thinking he was one of the bad guys.
Yeah.
Because there was no way he could actually just be stupid boyfriend.
I know. I was thinking that too. I'm like, there's some plot going on here, and he's in on it. And then in the end, it's like,
Yes.
no, he's noble. He was trying to save her. You know.
No, the people who we thought are in on it actually are not.
Yeah.
And now they're both dead.
Let's move to the other person we thought would be in on it, Patty Brain.
What a name.
Here's our cheerleader,
funny
head
name.
cheerleader, big tits, drops her
Drops her
drops
what?
her pants at the drops. Oh, there's too many drops in that sentence. It freaked me out. It's like
She's dropping everything, guys. Hold on. She's dropping it all.
well, she both drops her pants and her hat, apparently. She's a tall, curvaceous blonde who drops her pants at the drop of a hat. That double drop just really freaked me out.
It threw you for a loop.
It did. I couldn't handle it. It's like in the, when you have the robot and you ask him the question that's a paradox and he just freaks out and explodes. You know how that is.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But here it is. Now Patty was coming, bouncing and hopping in her chest-busting t-shirt like a good cheerleader should.
Oh boy.
Chest busting makes me think of like aliens and
Yeah,
like
chest busting.
Yeah.
So Patty is the head cheerleader, of course, who verbally harasses Jane because she was offended by the article. Who does that thing? Okay, like I was bullied in high school and junior high and most of my life, but I have a real problem in media and books where the bullies just kind of walk up and hang out by the person, and it makes me so uncomfortable that Patty and her minions come and sit right behind Jane in homeroom. Like I had a visceral reaction to that.
Yeah. Question about this is just funny to me. On the news, when they mentioned Patty in the situation involving the boat, they called her the head cheerleader at the high school. Would a news report say that?
Well, they would only say that if the head cheerleader actually said, "I'm head cheerleader at Wilcox High."
Patty would have done that. She
someone
totally
would have had
that.
to draw attention to it for the news
She's that
to
kind
say
of girl.
that.
Yeah, there's not a ton to say about her. She fulfills her role as mean girl. I think she's easy to hate, and I thought it was kind of funny when she tried to bang the cop, and then he was like,
Yeah,
he said something like,
"What the hell?"
I know he said something like, "Oh, of course, never," and then he like paused. And he goes, "Yeah, that could get me in trouble." Like it's like he did consider it for a second.
I mean, he's 33.
Yeah.
So I do have that problem where I think of the adults as like adults,
Yep.
so older than me, and I'm 8 years older than him. So sure, okay, it's still bad, but it's not ridiculous at this point.
Yeah.
Is that she might flirt with a 33-year-old, apparently handsome cop. There is the best exchange, though, between her and Jane, and this speaks to Jane being quick-witted. "You're not a tramp. You're a pro. You take care of every guy on varsity, and you've got enough endurance left for the junior varsity."
Oh boy.
It's like clearly Patty fulfills the Pike archetype of, I mean, I'm surprised she didn't mention wanting to go to Hollywood to be a model or an actor.
Mm-hmm.
Unless she did and I missed it. Because that is part of that character without question.
I think we should discuss the super offensive article that Jane wrote about Patty and the cheerleaders, because it's Not offensive at all, in my opinion.
No, not at all.
Track High put another 6 points on the board at the end of the third period on a 2-yard quarterback sneak. Not to worry, Wilcox's indomitable pep squad took a 2-minute hair and lipstick break, and we're smiling pretty when our boys got their hands on the ball again on the ensuing kickoff. Like, that really got Patty to want to, like, attack her verbally all the time. Like,
I was
for the rest
about
of her life. Yeah,
that is insane. Like, that is not offensive. Like,
because I think she wrote that as a sophomore.
Oh damn!
Because there's some mention that I'm gonna make that you pay for this for the rest of your high school career, and Jane's a senior now, so I feel like this is like a 2 or 3 year vendetta that the two of them have, which really makes Patty petty.
Petty Patty.
Petty Patty.
It's so shitty too because she involves other people. Like there are other girls that she turns against her to like knock her books out of her hand. And like I'm like, Jane, you need to punch somebody in the face and teach them a lesson. Like they are not going to stop fucking with you until you defend yourself. You're just standing there like crying while somebody else throws their McDonald's Coke in somebody's face. Like, what are you doing? Like stand up for yourself. I don't get it. It made me mad every time they were rude to her.
The Coke thing.
Yeah, I just made up McDonald's.
No, but you're probably right. But it reminded me so much of like, I feel like they got Gleed, you know, with the Glee slushies. And
Yes,
that's what I thought. Of.
Yes.
I thought of that too.
Loves it.
So let's talk about the adults in the book. Lieutenant Fisher, whose only trait is that he's handsome and young, but here we go. He served as a medic in Vietnam. And what was left of the cabin reminded him of a bunker he had been living in that had been hit by a VC rocket. It was a black scar on the hills. So that's, again, another cop who had weird Vietnam flashbacks.
I wonder if Pike knows that you can be a cop without having previously served in Vietnam. Like, there are a lot of cops who don't have these weird war flashbacks.
Yeah, exactly. And he bursts in and saves the day at the end.
Yeah.
And carries hallucinating Jane.
And then the book just abruptly ends.
Yeah. Yeah. And, in such a way that it's just like, did I lose something?
Yeah.
And yeah, it was, but he does knock Dr. Palmer into the pool.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
with an elbow to the chest.
That was so good.
Disgusting. Not the only disgusting adult in the book, but I knew from the moment Alice called him father, that there was something very problematic in this relationship, and I shouldn't trust either of these people. And then he says, like a good girl.
Oh,
it's really just uncomfortable.
That's gross.
He's one of 2 characters who have a sit down with Jane about what girls should and shouldn't be doing in their sex life these days.
Yeah,
and they happen back to back, and it's really uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they help set up sort of why, obviously why Alice would have the issues that she has regarding sexuality and the attitudes, and why perhaps, it is so humiliating for Jane to be exposed in that way, because, it is humiliating to have your private thoughts and fantasies like expressed to everyone. But the idea of people wondering about your sex life, like, I mean, I imagine that was a lot more horrific in the 80s than it is now, you know? And, but again, something I never related to because I wasn't having sex when I was that young, and when I was young, and nobody gave a shit if I was. But it's
okay. This is a safe space, Randall.
But yeah, it's, I thought those scenes were so especially the one with the teacher. They were
Mr. Pan.
That was like so absurd to the point of comedy that like a teacher would ever do that. But I mean, also really disturbing. But like it was so silly. Whereas like, and these are very heightened depictions, I think, of real conversations that probably happen. Like the dentist character, like he, like I could I can see an adult having that kind of conversation like with somebody, but it was so like over the top and like ominous. And just when he's saying he was going to like thought about firing her over this and everything, it's like so crazy. But it's like, I think they were just trying to set up that there is this, you know, that's where sort of all of this sexual shame and stuff comes from, is from the top down, you know, either whether it's embarrassment with the teacher or it's like shame with the dentist, you know.
Very, very true. And he apparently talks to everybody about things, and some doctor at the free clinic told their dentist about someone getting fitted for a diaphragm. I don't understand that at all. He gets all the gossip, sure, but that one is really difficult for me. that someone who works at the free clinic who was, I mean, that's just bothersome right there.
Yeah.
I think it's really weird too. Like, I think that they tried to make the cops seem more like the better of the adults, but all three of those men were creepy. Like,
yeah,
all of them. And like in the very beginning, the cop is like, these kids seem to be developing quicker each year. Like, why are you thinking that looking at a little girl? Like, that's fucking weird. Gross, dude. But he's like the handsome one that's gonna like save them at the end. And he's like, I've been thinking about you all night. Like,
yeah, that was weird.
What?
That was a really just bad way to end the book right there.
Yeah, I'll have more thoughts on this later, but you know, it's the way that, you know, every character sort of has to be unpacked physically first, you know, before anything else is something I'll discuss later. But when it comes from like a teenage boy or whatever, and he's looking at his classmates, that's one thing. Like, I mean, but then when the character is like a 33-year-old, he's talking about these teenage girls like filling out and everything, it's like, that's really, really like gross. So I also got very gross vibes from the detective, even though I think he was supposed to be the cool one.
Yeah, I didn't like any of the adults.
And meanwhile, the one who thinks he's the cool one, Mr. Pan, is the psych teacher and senior class counselor. He was always trying to get problem students to open up to him. He put a hand on her shoulder. Touching was one of his favorite ways of communicating.
No, thank you.
Like this, that I've saved a lot of these quotes for the problematic section, but this right here, like he says, I wholly disagree that it is outside my prerogative as your counselor to discuss sex with you three, and says he's going to bring condoms on this trip for them.
What? It's so gross.
Yeah, it really is. And him being a hippie in the 60s does not excuse this type of...
I thought he was going to be in on it somehow. Like, they made him so lecherous that I thought there was going to be something that was going to come out with him. Yeah.
Like, oh, he's coming on the trip? Like, these are all red herrings being just thrown in. Like, who's going to kill these people because they're upset about their sex?
Yeah, that's true, too. He's probably just trying to throw in some red herrings. But the thing is, like, the plot just doesn't really allow for that, you know? Like,
no, it doesn't.
Like, he's so on the on, like, the periphery of the plot that's going on that you can't even, like, reasonably consider that. Like, I was like, well, maybe he'll be in on it somehow, but I let that go, you know? Because it was like, well, there's just no space for him there, you know? And, because, you know, King, I mean, I said King, like all these horror writers, they love a good red herring, but it's like, so I feel like that's maybe what he was trying to do with the Pan character, but because obviously he could be excised, you know, I mean, I think he was also trying to feed into the, you know, Pike was using him to feed into the humiliation of it all, but it was,
yeah, that's true. So it was even positive stuff about sexuality.
Yeah, but it was
is still humiliating.
Yeah. And it was so shoehorned in, and like the comic tone of it, like, kind of clashed, I think, a little bit with the general tone, because it was just so silly, you know, and also just so gross that it was like veering on silly. So,
well, that's it for our characters. So we're going to close the door to the Midnight Club and take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're moving into Remember Me. Friends, where else can you get this kind of programming than the PikeCast? Nowhere, that's where.
but we're trying to keep the lights on here. If you like what you're hearing and want it to keep happening, jump over to our Patreon at thepikecast.com/Patreon and throw us a few bucks to join our private Discord server. Higher tiers get books, stickers, bookmarks, and even personalized shirts. That's thepikecast.com/Patreon.
Once, Osgood and Frost were the up-and-coming stars of the burgeoning paranormal investigation TV show craze before a hoax put an end to their friendship, partnership, and television careers. Now, over a decade later, Prudence Osgood is a barely functioning alcoholic ghost hunter for hire. Her yearning for mystery and adventure is reignited when she receives a cryptic, untraceable email. She can't resist embarking on an investigation that tugs threads, winding through a sinister series of disappearances, her former partner's family, and a night 20 years ago when a semi blew a yellow light and nearly killed her. Reviewers are calling Osgood Is Gone a masterfully vulnerable and relatable 21st century horror story, and a bourbon-soaked supernatural mystery with sparkling dialogue that sticks the landing on LGBT characters, and main character Prudence Osgood, as tortured as she is clever, broken in all the best ways, and a true heroine for our times. Buy it today at Osgood Is Gone as a paperback, ebook, or audiobook narrated by me, JJ Ronvier.
Hello, Pikers. Are you enjoying the PikeCast? Good. Do you have Pike books at home? If so, show us on social media using hashtag #ShowUsYourPike.
Okay, welcome back to the PikeCast. Now we move into Remember Me, where we really dig into the plot of this book. So, along with about 60 classmates, Jane is going sailing to the Santa Barbara Islands to swim and hike and goof off. Doesn't 60 feel like a real massive amount of people?
Yeah, especially
Yeah,
right
there were
now.
60 people on that boat?
Yeah.
I didn't
Like-
realize that.
This should have been a 10-person boat.
Yeah.
It would have been just fine. And like there's 60, and they talk about how Dr. Palmer is the ship's captain, and he has never sailed before.
Yeah, that was funny.
Like, you don't just jump on a 60-person sailboat and sail.
So was this affiliated with the school, or was it like did the dentist, like, he funded it, right?
I think he funded it.
Okay.
But he
Yeah.
invited an employee from the school as a chaperone for some reason.
Right. I think that's where I got confused. And like, but also this whole, like, this is just like this whole concept of all these students getting together, going to an island on a boat and everything. It just felt like, I don't know, so far, again, from my experience when I was in high school. I'm like,
Yes.
like, we were lucky when we went to like a field trip, like a mile away. So the concept of 60 kids going on like a luxury yacht for a trip to the coast and everything was very strange to me, but it just seemed sort of like a way to just get everybody on a boat. So,
Like, really, this plot could have been so simplified.
yeah.
And it is ridiculously convoluted. So much so that I would go back pages like, what did I miss here? Because it just, so the idea, let me just see if I can break it down. Jane's embarrassed. So she's going to get herself knocked into the water by Patty and Kirk. And it's going to embarrass them, but then pretend nothing happened. I don't understand that.
How does it
because
embarrass them?
Yeah, like, well, they're going to get accused of murder.
Yeah. Tarnish their reputations.
Yeah.
But if she's there on Monday, no reputation's tarnished. You're fine.
I think they
Yeah,
yeah,
I
might be
think-
the weekend, though, of the tarnished reputation.
Maybe
should've
it's
gone
just
with
she wants them to
injecting-
be taken into the police station and interrogated.
Oh, step 5 was the worst step on her list. She should have done the incurable disease thing.
I know. What I thought was funny was just like he basically had to have Alice just like unpack like the whole setup for the plan, which involved her like, you know, scuba diving all night around the side of the dock or whatever to add all these like clamps and shit and like scuba gear on the bottom of the boat. Like, and then just the like, and then I felt like he had thought up this plot and then his editor or something just kept asking him all these questions about like logistics. And then he just recorded that conversation and then made it the conversation between Alice and the cop, because he kept being like, well, what about this and what about this, and Alice is like, well, you know, the like, won't the boat drive funny? And he's like, and she's like, yeah, but you know, it's his first time sailing, so he won't know that. You know, and I'm like this is so complicated. Like and just the logistics of like falling off a boat and then immediately like pulling all the scuba gear from the bottom of the boat, going 40 feet to the bottom, and then putting it all on.
Yeah,
It's like,
would it be easy to
just
change your
boggles the mind.
sweater under the water? Like, I just need to know. How
I mean,
it seems hard.
Putting a wetsuit on in the best of conditions is difficult, but putting it on 40 feet underwater.
Yeah.
And a wetsuit is designed to hold in the heat your body already has. If you go underwater for that much time, you lose that body heat and you may die. And you may die pretty quickly.
Yeah, this plot is just so crazy. And just, but almost what was even nuttier to me was just the whole concept of trying to get someone to push you like near the edge of a boat, you know, like there's just so much straining in this plot. Like, I feel like, you know, I don't know. I can't speak for him, but this is, I think, what happens when your deadlines are really tight is you maybe have like a central idea, like, and you know that that's what you want to pursue, but the logistics of getting there just get so complicated that, and then you're like, you're locked in, you know, you have to keep running with this. Because it's like the general explanation of how all of this was set up is so beyond belief to me, like, and just mind boggling. In terms of books that came out in 1988, there's Last Act, Spellbound, and Gimme a Kiss.
Oh, I love Spellbound.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, those were the 3 that came out in 1988. So, but then only no books came out in 1987, and only one came out in 1989. So,
okay, so he may have been writing these all through 87. Okay. But still, that's a lot of books.
Yeah.
In a short amount of time. I mean, this to me definitely feels like a more proto-Pike than our later books. You know, Die Softly is after in the 90s, so is Monster. Like those books feel more fully formed, and this one feels a lot like him exploring ideas. And to come to this one after Slumber Party last time, which is his first published book, it really still feels like we're in that exploratory phase where things are kind of hokey and things don't make a lot of sense and people behave in plot directions rather than actual behavior.
Yeah.
So it's definitely doesn't feel as quality. And there's a better way to say that, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's just a real sloppiness to this book that, like, in terms of structure, in terms of plotting, in terms of character development, that doesn't mean to say that I hated it or anything. I think that there's a lot of charms in this book, but there is something just kind of so mind-boggling about it. Fun story. I was writing a book when I was in high school about vampires, and I realized when I was rereading this book that the whole scuba section inspired a whole part in the book I was writing when I was in high school. I've never been scuba diving in my entire life. And I have a whole section in my book where they go scuba diving and all this like crazy stuff happens while they're scuba diving. And I realized, I'm like, and you said that there was another book that had scuba diving in it?
Yes, it is. Bury Me Deep.
Yeah, I
Very deep. Okay.
feel like I had been reading this and that one around the same time, or around the time I'd written it, because I have no clue why I would have written this scuba diving scene in this book, if not for having been inspired by this. And I was having those pings of recognition when I was reading this. I'm like, this totally inspired my scuba section. And I was like, I think probably stealing certain like details from this book.
Back to our plot. We do have a Chekhov's X-ray in this book, because Sharon picks up the X-rays and freaks out that she doesn't want to see her own X-ray. So they mention X-rays, and X-rays are important as we go. So let's see if we can parse out what happens after Jane leaves the boat. She gets to her car. What?
I thought you were asking us to tell you, and so I was volunteering.
No, please. Please.
No, you tell it better.
Us there. Okay. Okay. She gets to her car. She drives to almost all the way to Sharon's, but forgot to get gas. So she walks the rest of the way to this cabin that seems to be under construction. I'm not clear on that. And someone is shooting at her. Do we ever find out that it's Alice?
I think so.
Yeah, I think Alice owns up to it in the final bit. Yeah.
Okay. Because I was very confused.
Yeah.
Like, is there another person there shooting at her? Is it Patty? Okay, so Alice is shooting at her. Sharon arrives. She thinks Sharon is the one who was shooting at her, but doesn't know who's coming through the door, so hits her with a fire poker. Then Alice throws a Molotov cocktail into the cabin. Jane survives by soaking herself and putting on the wetsuit. Doesn't compressed air explode in fire?
I don't know, but I feel like I've seen enough like gas tank or like, tanks like blow up when encountered with heat in movies. So I'll go with yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at least in movies it does. I don't know if it actually does, but that's the flaw in her plan as far as I can see. But it is so Pike. It is so visceral that her feet get so burned that part of her foot comes off.
Yeah.
When she's pushing the car out of its spot. They don't even dwell on that. But we know that that's what happened. It's, oh my God, it's just wild. And today I learned, I didn't know this, that dentists used to use cocaine solution.
Yeah.
For numbing. I first thought it was just, hey, look, a Pike cocaine reference. But no, dentists actually use cocaine solution to numb things. Yeah. Don't anymore, but did. Just wild there.
Can you explain why, maybe this is where the x-rays come in. This is where I think the part I missed. Why did they think Sharon's body was Jane's?
Because Jane went back to the dentist's office and switched her x-ray with Sharon's x-ray.
That's crazy.
It's bizarre to me because her feet are peeling off. She goes all the way back to this thing and they don't know. So I'm sorry, but there's bits of flesh from her feet in the ground, but none in the doctor's office. There's no indication that this like bloody foot woman was walking around swapping things out.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
I mean, she did have to go there to get all the supplies. So she has that horror movie moment where someone's patching themselves up. But yeah, again, way, way more convoluted than it needs to be.
Yeah, I think I glazed over during some of those sections.
And did she drive away in the car that had not had gas before?
Well, she rolled it down the hill, and I know from the stand that if you roll an older car down a hill and it's got a clutch, you can sometimes get it to start.
Huh.
I don't understand how that works.
And then
but
she just
I know they
happened
did it in the stand.
She somehow got it to start again at the dentist's office, and then again.
At some point, she would have had to get gas.
It would have really, if she had just gotten gas to begin with before she headed to the cabin, instead of being so worried somebody might see her over that weekend, she could have saved herself so much trouble.
Yeah, totally. If she'd put more thought into any of her plan, she could have not killed her best friend not burned her feet beyond recognition. Yeah, okay, so why don't we move? Oh, before we move, McDonald's watch. No one actually eats McDonald's in this book, but Jane leaves her car with the key taped to the bottom of the engine. Think about that.
The engine?
In an alley behind a McDonald's.
Yes.
I don't know a lot about cars, I'm going to admit, but is that a feasible thing that somebody would tape that to that spot? And it's under the hood, right? It's inside.
It is under the hood, yeah. I don't understand it personally, so I'm not going to try to explain it, Cassie, because I don't get it.
Okay, it's not just me though.
No. It seems like an odd choice.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, just plot-wise for me, that I had trouble wrapping my brain around was just basically like Alice being adept with both a gun and capable of making a Molotov cocktail, throwing it through a window. Like
what is she?
And also, like, why did she want? This might be a really obvious question, but I don't know if I missed it. Why did she want to kill Jane? Like, I can understand why she wanted to kill Kirk. Like, but why did she want to kill Jane?
Maybe because she was with her ex-boyfriend. So even though she was saying like, no, it's fine, I don't mind, she was actually like mad about it the whole time.
I feel like she may have said something like that, but in her monologuing, I also got very confused.
Yeah, I think it's like, because she seemed to be mad at Kirk because he, ruined her, quote unquote. So it's like, yes. It seems like her anger with, like, the thing that she's really mad about is all directed towards Kurt. So I'm just not, like, I had trouble understanding why, because then why would she be jealous of Jane if Kirk ruined her? Like, you'd think she'd want to protect her friend and be like, oh, I'm going to kill Kirk so he doesn't ruin you too, Like, that to me would have made at least a little more sense. So I think I just got confused at some point. I'm like, wait, why does she want to kill Jane,
I have a potential reason.
Okay.
So Alice used opportunity to kill Kirk.
Okay.
But then when she realized that Jane was still alive, she had to kill Jane too?
So there was a part too where she's saying like we should both kill ourselves because we're both like sullied or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Maybe she felt like she was doing her a favor by killing her.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I don't know. It's really strange because when you say she killed Kirk, when she killed him for like opportunity, but like she planned that. It was premeditated. Like she brought the laughing gas with her in addition to the other one. Yeah. She was like, the right canister was for Kirk and then this one was for me. So my thing was, how long ago did Sharon tell her about the plan? Like, how did she know that far in advance to know what to bring on the boat, to know like, this one had a lot of holes in it.
Sharon must have told her immediately after Jane told her the plan.
But wasn't there an implication too that, like, I could be wrong on this, but like that when Jane told Sharon, like, didn't she tell her like in the office or something? And
she did. That there might be like microphones or something.
Or like her dad, like Alice's dad heard somehow, and maybe he was the one who told. I don't know. I remember
seem involved.
Yeah, I feel like that might have been the other way that Alice found out early. But again, it very sloppy. So
well, and you mentioned Dad might be involved. Like, they do definitely imply he's somehow involved, but don't reveal that how at all. Like they don't go into it.
Right.
So like they do all this setup of the evil prude dentist and then just don't give us any payoff. Except for him getting knocked into the pool, which is the Abbott and Costello payoff of a plot line.
Mm-hmm.
So we've already basically moved into the Eternal Enemy section, which is our thoughts on the antagonist. There is some vagary on antagonists in this book, but I think we'd all agree that Alice is the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
So her monologuing is out of control. But Cassie, I know you love it. So tell us how this hit you.
I'm sitting here smiling. Yeah, no, I was happy for it because you don't know really what's happening. Like when they do the cabin and stuff, you don't know who's shooting. You don't know who's throwing. Like everything's on fire. People's skins like coming off. And I was like, who's doing this? Like, who's behind all of this? So when she finally starts, like, you know what I don't like though is because she's doing the monologue and she's explaining everything, and you can tell that there's a lot that went into it and that she's emotionally invested in what she's saying, but they're also under the influence of this gas in this house.
Yeah.
So they're like all loopy and not making sense. And she's like, I love red candles. And it's like, what's happening? I wanted it to be more punchy, I think, like a little bit less loopy for that.
It was surprising, yeah, that they were just descending into this laughing gas madness.
Yeah, that was actually, I thought that was kind of neat. Like the fact that Pike, like, kind of, you know, he tailored the text, you know, like even his prose became more loopy and disjointed and sort of confused in ways that I thought it was sort of a neat stylistic trick. I don't think he like fully pulled it off, but like but I do think it was sort of ambitious. And
yeah, with the matches, like she dropped 1,000 matches.
Yeah,
and
that was neat. Yeah.
It was. I mean, there's a lot to like here. It's just not polished. Yeah. That's what I think it is.
Yeah.
And it's another one of those books like Slumber Party that I feel like it could have used another draft or two.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that, you know, and that's understandable for the utter speed that these are being written. But okay, I think there's no better time to talk about this. Alice's reason for all of this is because she thinks Kirk gave her cold sores. That's it.
Yeah.
And as a sex educator, it really, really bothers me that herpes and cold sores are the major impetus in all the violence in this book.
Yeah.
It really bothers me. And I was willing to forgive the abortion shaming in Whisper of Death. How does everybody else feel about this? Because I feel like I'm too close to this.
Not everybody at once, though.
Yes.
I mean, no, I'm right there with you. I thought I was like, is this a joke? Like, is this, so I didn't read this one. This is another one I did not read. We keep starting with books that I actually didn't read as a kid because I read his later stuff and like the stuff from the early 90s. So when we got to that big reveal and she's kind of being like ambiguous, she's like, he gave me a gift, or he gave this to me. Bad boys give it to me. And I was like, what is she talking about? And then I flashed back to all the scenes where she had touched her mouth and they had like made a point to touch on her like cold sore. And I was like, are you fucking serious right now? All of this for that?
Yeah, I think
What?
I think I would have preferred it if she was getting revenge based on jealousy for the fact that Jane was
Yes.
dating.
Yeah.
Like it was definitely a letdown that this was the big thing in the end.
I was going to say, I think the way I read it is just like, you know, this is how much like her dad screwed her up by like instilling this fear of sex. And I think the idea of like the fact that she, you know, did what her dad always told her not to do and then got this, you know, suddenly has these cold sores, like these physical things to show for it, is like just drove her crazy, you know, because she had been instilled with so much shame about this sort of thing. And so I think it's like messy and obviously kind of, you know, a really bizarre choice. But the, you know, yeah, so I guess I just read it from that perspective where the real villain was her dad for demonizing sex in such a way for her, you know.
I think
But I can edit this real quick.
Yeah.
The demonizing is because she had sex, not because of the cold sores. And she's damaged because she had sex with him and then he left her. And so there we go. I just wrote herpes out of the story.
Yeah, exactly.
it definitely
Really
gives me,
unnecessary.
as we're talking to Randall from the Loser Club podcast, I wanted to bring up the fact that this kind of reminds me of Carrie in a way. How the mom, like, she has her period and she's like, oh no, this is like bad. This is real bad. And it's like, cold sores are very common for a lot of people. This isn't like you just get them sometimes. It just happens, you know? And it's just, I don't know, it just definitely gave me the Carrie vibes when it comes to like the mother being like super religious, super hard on her about things, being like, oh, getting your period is bad, dude. Like, so I don't know, I just wanted to like bring the comparison of the two, I suppose.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, I think, yeah, like I still think like one of the more, like, I don't know, it's really interesting to hear people who like know Carrie, like especially women, and just discuss sort of like period shaming, right? Like that experience of it when they were young, and how that really ripples throughout Carrie, and serves as this weird impetus for it. And yeah, I think like the way you get so confused about sexuality when you're young, and when you have adults in your life who are putting ideas in your head that are like, just really damaging like that, the way that they can manifest outside of that is it can be scary. And just those, and so I don't know. Yeah. It's like, I found that interesting that he was trying to tackle that in this book. But the operatic kind of quality of it, and how hysterical it becomes and soap opera-y it becomes, like it started to feel a little bit like, I don't know, like a parody of they're all gonna laugh at you,
exactly.
from Carrie. Yeah. It's like, it became this, it was like this heightened, almost like goofy version of it, because it just gets so unhinged in the end. Yeah.
When you look at it as they're talking about this thing that happened, and they're almost having the conversation that I feel like, again, we talked about Pike sort of having a conversation with his editors when it comes to the shaming aspect of sexuality. So Alice is making the pitch for sexy time is bad. And meanwhile, Jane is over here. This is the dumb broad part. You dumb broad, don't you know anything? Your dad's a dentist. You should know all about viruses.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently Alice thinks that in order to get rid of herpes, you give it to someone else.
Yeah, that was...
Which is, I mean, that's it follows right there.
Yeah.
That's the whole plot of It Follows. And I almost, when she said that, I thought she was going to try to kiss Jane to give it to her.
It's called Gimme a Kiss because of the
Yeah.
like, that's clever. I didn't put it together.
It
Dang.
is.
Look, don't think less of me when I'm slow to catch on.
No.
I'll get there eventually. Oh goodness. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Sorry.
No.
I feel like I got like another. I'm like, ooh, I just unlocked something.
I feel like I seen the light bulb like flash above your head, and I really enjoyed it.
Yes, because he was saying that, and I was like, I'm looking at the book cover, and then I was like, oh my, and then he's like, oh, she might have given her a kiss. I was like, oh.
Like that moment in a movie where they say the name of the movie. It's like, yeah.
Yes. Well, they say it in the book too, and I did have that reaction, but even then, I did not put it together. Why it was named?
Well, see, realizing stuff like that is fun. So I'm glad we could be a part of it with you,
Yeah,
Cassie.
I'm glad to share that with you guys.
So yeah, Alice is a mediocre villain who's really just fucked up by other people. I'm kind of disappointed that Patty didn't become a villain of any kind or have any comeuppance or really have any storyline after 2/3 of the way through the book.
Yeah, she was just a device, yeah.
Yeah. Like they could have really easily sort of combined Alice and Patty and made a real villain. But I guess the ambiguity is good? I don't know. Let's move on to Thirst, where we talk about titillation and sexuality in Pike's world. There's surprisingly little dirty stuff in this book.
Yeah.
I do have this. Just how much time do you think a teenage boy needs anyway? I don't know. None of the books she had read on the subject had told her. I love the idea that she's reading books to find out how long guys last. But why wouldn't Sharon have told her?
Yeah.
Because if Sharon wasn't hungry and talking about food, she was talking about sex. She had, and this is my favorite part. If you could believe her, and she exaggerated so much and so often that she never had reason to lie, she slept with 3 guys.
Hey man, when you're that age, that is a lot. Or
Okay,
I just mean like if I heard a friend of mine slept with 3 people, I would have been like, "Holy fuck, dude! Like you
Honestly,
are fascinating."
Me too. In high school,
Yeah, exactly.
It's just a very different perspective from a non-monogamous person here reading this today.
I'm just going to stay quiet over here about my 17-year-old life.
Well, no, I mean, like that is a, you were not you. We often think of in high school the one and only. We will have sex and love and relationships forever with one person, and it's always the person we meet in, let's say, freshman year for some reason. So it really struck me as incongruous because the way it's said, I couldn't tell if Pike thought that was a lot or if he was making fun of the fact that Jane thought that was a lot. But also Jane figured Sharon had probably had her breasts fondled a couple of times.
And is that supposed to be a bad thing?
I don't know. Again, I couldn't find the tone there. Like, I couldn't figure out what they were saying. But that is really almost all of the sex in this book. Like, this almost could have been a point horror.
It's wild.
Yeah.
because the
Toning
book
it down a
is-
little bit.
This book
Yeah.
is super sexual, but not at the same time. Like when it comes,
Yeah, but not at all.
right.
Yeah,
I
it's
feel like
all about sexuality, but we don't get any juicy morsels. So,
Juicy
Does
morsels.
it disappoint you, Cassie, like it did with Midnight Club?
It did, but I will say there was a lot of death in this one, like
Okay, yeah,
Molotovs
true.
being thrown
Yeah.
and guns and stuff. So
Explosion.
that was better than the
So
other one.
if you're
just
not
made
going to
me
have
sad.
sex in the book, you better fucking be killing people.
Yes, that's literally where I am with my story consumption. Like, if you are not doing something dirty, you better be doing something gory. Like,
yeah,
I'm here for that.
Well,
I'm
those
not
were the-
here for like sad
yeah.
people.
that was the reasons we came to. I think a lot of us were drawn to Pike, right? It was like we
Yeah.
wanted the blood and we wanted the sex, and it was yeah.
And
So
that's
I
what we
will say-
couldn't get from, say, R.L. Stein.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so, so I will say Gimme a Kiss, like, definitely lacked sort of the titillation factor, but it was, which was just funny because, like, yeah, everything in this book hinges on sort of like, I don't know, like unformed ideas about sexuality, which is
Yeah,
maybe
that's
why,
true.
which is maybe why we don't actually get it, is because these are characters who, for the most part, are confused about sex. So
Right. We even have condoms,
do-
but no sex.
Yeah.
Condoms. And then she
Yeah.
asks, "Are these real?
Yeah,
like, are
yeah,
there
are
What
these
did you
condoms?"
real?
think, bro? What did you think? Like that was so.
Are these
weird.
real or just samples?
I
Like,
would
what
like-
are the samples?
Right,
What
I
do
Are
would
the
the
like
samples
to-
not
do?
real?
I would like to know what a fake condom is. Like,
Like, do these work? Is it
right.
like using a finger cut? What are we doing here? But I do like that Jane has an aside. Why did I care who knew I was horny when everyone is horny? And that feels like a moment of actual clarity on
yes,
sexuality. And it's just
yeah,
like,
I
yes,
wrote that line down.
right. Yeah. Okay, let's go to problematic because a lot of the sexuality is in there.
There's also a lot of fat shaming when it comes to the doctor.
Yeah, but he's an asshole. I'm
That's
fine
true.
with fat
But
shaming
there's one
assholes.
line that was like, Jane didn't know how someone who didn't eat white sugar could get so fat. And I don't know, like, I guess I always pick up on the fat shaming for some reason, regardless of like how bad or good a character is. He was a shit,
Yeah.
though. He
I
was
do
definitely
too.
a shit.
I do too. But as as a fat person now, if you're making fun of someone who's fat and they're not a bad person, I get really upset. But if you're making fun of, let's say, a now ex-president for being fat,
Yeah.
I think because, like the doctor would have a problem being called fat. So he's an asshole. So calling him fat is attacking his assholery. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't usually use that because I feel like there are a lot of other insults I could go with that
True.
are mean, or like calling somebody fat. I'm like, you have excess body fat on your body. Like, that's not really an insult to me. So I feel like, but I do agree that it can count as like an adjective when you're like, you're a fat asshole. That makes the asshole part sound worse. I agree. So I totally get what you're saying from that. But me personally, like I picked up on that too, Becca, because I was like, he sounds like a total fucking trash bag. You could say so many
Right, you
worse
could
things
call
about
him.
him.
You can call him a total trash bag instead of calling him a walrus. Like,
A fat trash bag, like.
Well, at least none of the teenagers are fat.
Yeah.
and that's the problematic part. Like, I'm still suffering from Sammy in Die
Oh.
Softly being just berated for being fat.
Yeah, poor Sammy.
Yeah,
But I
guess
do
for
like
me,
the way you said that, Cassie. And I think the best fat insult ever is you have excess body fat.
That's my go-to. I mean,
Yeah,
if that's the
that's
insult I'm going with.
fantastic. That's fantastic. I'm sorry, Randall. I keep interrupting you.
It's fine. I was just gonna say, I think where I struggle with like the way that the book foregrounds like physical appearance is, and King does this too. We talk about it a lot on the podcast. Is the general concept of like good people are like hot, right? And then bad people are ugly, and that happens a lot. Like where the physical appearance, like in a lot of ways. And then, like even like Alice, like her physical beauty is like framed in almost ominous ways. Like she can be like, not all bad people are gross or grotesque. Like some are beautiful, but they are in a way where like they have black hair and pale skin,
Looks
and
like
it's
a vampire.
Yeah, it looks like a vampire. And it's just like, I always cringe at those certain depictions where somebody's like physical appearance is like lends itself in the narrative to them being undesirable or gross or evil, like bad. And yeah, King does that a lot in his books. And whereas like the protagonist, is always this like beautiful, desirable person who has an insane libido and all this other stuff, it's like, it's always very funny to me. So, and I just kind of hate the whole concept of like the first thing we learn about a character often is like, how big are their boobs or whatever, which King does all the time. Like all of his early books, like even a lot of his later books, he cannot talk about a woman.
With boobs.
Yeah, he cannot talk about a female character without describing her breasts. And yeah, so there's aspects of that too. And like we mentioned it earlier, but yeah, just like the cop sort of like leading us off by describing physically like all these different women and their various attributes to me is just kind of a gross way of going about it. And as we see, it's always a lot more with female characters than male characters. So just definitely part of, I think, a writing trend that is never been one of my favorite things. So.
When with Pike, it's a little skewed from King because Pike's heroes are almost universally plain. And as I think, Cassie, you mentioned earlier, the nose thing.
What, that it's not big, or that she doesn't mention it?
Well, no, that usually they have a bigger nose or a crooked jaw or something like that. Just some attribute that makes them less than perfect.
Yeah.
And the bad people are either grotesque or cheerleaders with giant breasts
and cocaine.
And cocaine. Yeah, there's often cocaine involved. It is wild when you look at when you read these in close succession with an analytical viewpoint instead of, let's say, a 12-year-old viewpoint. It's really interesting to see the trends.
And there are a lot of them. And I think it's cool too, as we're reading these together, because obviously when I read these as a kid, I didn't talk about them to anybody. I didn't either. For me. So I think it's so cool that I get to hear what you guys think. And like, I get to be like, oh my God, guys, I didn't know this title had to do with this actual book.
I'll say too about like when writing about, people who are overweight, like King, Pike sort of does what King does here too, which he almost like fetishizes the size, and like the body shape. Like it's honestly like there's just that character can't do anything. Like Dr. Palmer can't do anything in this book without it somehow relating to the fact that he's a big dude. And like that's how King is with his overweight characters too. Like especially like the book Thinner, which is about a guy.
Thinner.
Yeah. Like when we talked about that, we spent a lot of time on that topic because the way that King writes like overweight people in that book, it's grotesque. It's like a creature. It's not even human. And that's just obviously, kind of obnoxious and immature. And so, yeah, that drives me a little bit crazy too. Like we can't write a character who is overweight without mentioning it every time they do anything, Right.
Like I'm always here for like the positive body positivity. I can't talk. Wow. Body positivity. Cause like, I don't know, like young adult books are really doing that right now. Like contemporaries, like To Be Honest by Maggie St. Martin, I think, and Dumplin'. They're like I don't know. I just really like those books because it's like, yeah, you have the fat character, but we're not being mean to them for being fat. And I think that's fantastic. So it does really bother me when, like, we make the villain. Well, I guess he wasn't the villain in this book, but, like, the shitbag, I guess. A fat
No, but
guy, and
actually,
then mention it a
we
lot.
probably thought he was the
Oh,
villain
yeah,
partially
for
because
sure.
he was fat.
Right, yeah.
Like, we've been led into that direction.
I mean, he gave me bad vibes the moment he went into the interrogation
Oh,
room. So.
without question.
And, like,
Without
Yeah,
question.
he's like a creep to his daughter.
Right, and then there's that part where they're like, it's pretty weird to be talking about being in bed and being good. And I was like, was that supposed to be a thing, like, sexual? Like, what are they trying to say? Like,
Yeah.
because of the way that their relationship was, it was really fucked up.
So they have a problematic relationship, but really, you know, we've mentioned this a few times, but it really is just an appalling scene when Mr. Pan, he first is excited that she is at home with her sensuality.
What a weird phrase.
Oh my God, yeah. And asks her where she did it. And like the girls here, Sharon and Alice, are absolutely right when they're saying, Mr. Pan, you shouldn't be having this discussion. This isn't proper. You know, boom, boom. But he just keeps going. And I couldn't help noticing in your recollection of that night that you didn't mention contraceptives.
Gross.
Whoa. And I bought these myself. I want you to have them. I want you to read the instructions on the side. And then, of course, Sharon asks, they're free?
Do they work?
I expected him to like whip out a banana and be like, do you guys need a demonstration?
Right.
Yeah.
Getting the Mean Girl vibes. What was that, Mean Girls, right? Where he's like, have sex and die or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's so upsetting. And what upsets me most is that since it's from the 80s, I can't tell if he's meant to be upsetting as a pedophile, or if he's meant to be upsetting as an adult. Like, is he just upsetting because he has no boundaries, or is he upsetting because he actively is interested in these girls?
Yeah, and I think it is like just that he's an adult, right? Like, I don't think that people were as concerned about these sorts of things, like at least back then. I'm playing this video game right now, and it's a very anime inspired game, and there's like, and this game came out in like 2013, I think, and there's like sections where there's like a 13-year-old girl and this like lesbian character who's older, like sexualizes her like several times throughout the game, and I'm so creeped out by it, but they treat it like it's no big deal, and it's just kind of like, that's just the thing she does because she's horny, you know, that's just part of her character. And it's like weird though, even though that was like 7 years ago, like the language, I feel like people have just gotten a lot more attuned to the sexualization of younger people, like, you know, over like the last several years even, you know.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And I think the Me Too movement had a lot to do with that. And I think having a grotesque, probably rapist in office had a lot to do with that. And Epstein had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, we've gone through a really interesting period, objectively looking at it, for sexual expression.
Yeah, and a lot of I feel like a lot of actresses lately too have come forward about how they were sexualized when they were young. And
absolutely.
like, I feel like they didn't feel empowered to do that previously because it's not a supportive environment. But like Megan Fox has done that, Chloe Grace Moretz, like they've all come forward recently, basically said when we were underage, these directors really wanted to exploit us sexually, and even if they weren't like making advances, like in terms of how they wanted to portray them, you know, in the film or just, you know, in whatever, it was extremely inappropriate, but it was just standard practice at that time, you know.
When Megan Fox is really the poster child for exploitation leading to the whole world thinking that's all she is.
Right, exactly.
And when you hear her talk and hear her and see her in newer stuff, or you look at her older stuff like Jennifer's Body through a new lens,
right?
It really is something how, as a man who was on that, look at how glam Megan Fox is trained back then, it really makes me realize how I was led into the that toxic viewpoint
Right.
with her. And I think we do see that a lot in this book, because ultimately it is a book about sexual shame, which is interesting because that's a reoccurring theme throughout Pike's books. But this is, the plot. It's not subplot. It's not subtext. It's actually plot.
Mm-hmm.
And we get just these really often upsetting points of view from different characters about the sex. It's something else.
So you guys, obviously, Becca and Cooper, but Randall, you remember Die Softly?
I remember elements of it, specifically the cocaine.
Okay, fair, yeah. The Alice in this one, doesn't she seem kind of like a baby Alexa? Like,
oh yeah, she's totally going to be
right?
a sugar sister when she grows
yes,
up.
she is a sugar sister. She's so conniving, and like I almost am angry at the way at the end and how the problematic bit, how they handled that, just because she could have been so much cooler. She could have been so much more Alexa Close-esque.
Nobody could be Alexa.
They kind of that's fair. And what's interesting too is this book came out a few years before that one, so it's like he improved upon his Alexa prototype. And I don't know, I just wanted to mention that because I thought it was cool.
No, I do think if you took Alice and Patty and combined them, you would have Alexa Close.
You think so? Because wasn't Alexa minus her villain plan of cocaine, wasn't she actually, if I remember right, nice? If
Alice was kind of nice too until we found out she's a psychopath.
I feel like Patty's mostly not nice though.
Well, I don't remember the girl with Alexa. Yeah. There was two girls, right? Alexa and her best friend Lisa. Was that her name?
Yes.
Oh yeah, okay. The other one.
Yeah, and I think Patty and Alice are like Lisa and Alexa.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like Patty is like a lesser version of Lisa, like bitchy, pretty, popular. Anyways, that was just my two cents.
Cool. I love when we bring up Alexa because I'm the number one Alexa stan. Always bring her up, please.
Yeah, and don't forget to get your Sugar Sisters merch
at
the PikeCast store.
Yes, everyone.
I wasn't shaming you, Becca, for not buying it. I'm telling our listeners to buy it.
He's like, make sure you get it, Becca.
Damn it, Becca, why haven't you bought it?
I know, I need it. I love Alexa so much. I'm going to be a Sugar Sister when I grow up.
Yeah, I will say I remember Die Softly being, like I mentioned earlier how I liked his ensembles. I remember Die Softly being a book where I really liked the ensemble. Where there was a really diverse, interesting cast of characters.
Yeah, it's a very I recommend giving that a read.
Yes.
Because it does not play well in the modern
Sure.
You should reread it.
It is a very interesting book.
You should reread it and then message me about how much you love Alexa. Please.
Well, shall we move on to the season of passage where we talk about the best and worst writing in the book?
Sure thing.
Okay. Does anyone have anything they want to get started with?
I have two that I would like to read. That is just
on which side?
Well written. Well written, yeah. Okay. So the first one is, the remains of darkness above her head, the cold salt water beneath her bare feet. These were the cloaks she would wear as she entered the carefree land of make-believe death. She would wrap herself in them tightly before she allowed herself to rest. So that was number one.
That is lovely, yeah.
Yeah. And number two. She had read 1,000 books where the heroine had been saved in the end by a timely shot, placed between the villain's eyes. But those shots had been fired by girls who could put holes in people on page 26 and make out with their boyfriends on page 42 and not even mess up their hair in between. So I like that one just because I read a lot of books.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, I vibed with it pretty well. So.
No, I really enjoyed that one too.
Yeah.
I pulled that, yeah.
I have a quote that I highlighted, and it's not really good or bad writing. It just freaked me out because I'm scared of underwater stuff. So,
okay,
I'm to the point where if it's a video game, so I really like video games, but I cannot play underwater levels. They make me so anxious and uncomfortable that I will give my boyfriend the controller and be like, "Can you get through this part for me, please?" While I just watch through my fingers. I hate underwater stuff. So
now, Cassie, have you played Donkey Kong Country?
Yes.
The underwater levels have the most calming music ever.
I don't even remember underwater levels.
Oh my God. You should just Google, and everybody at home, just Google Donkey Kong Country underwater music.
I'm gonna
It's
do it.
haunting and beautiful.
You get to
The
ride.
only
You get to ride the fish. I'm sorry. Now we're talking about Donkey Kong.
Yeah,
No, I don't
you
remember
get to
Fish
ride.
with the
I mean,
sharp
is it a
nose.
dolphin or
I
it's a
forgot what
dolphin,
it's
isn't
called.
it?
No, it's the one that's like he has a pointy
the
little nose.
swordfish.
Oh, it's a
I
swordfish.
think you're
Yeah,
correct. Yes.
yeah,
I
Anyways,
mean, I haven't played that part, but I know a fish with a pointy nose when I see
Yeah.
one.
that's what it's called. You're right.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
So,
sorry.
no, you're good. Floating weightless with immeasurable leagues of black water beneath her and 100 feet of sun-streaked blue above always made Jane
Yes.
feel as though she had entered the space of the alien solar systems found so often in the books she read. That's so
Yes.
creepy. Like, immeasurable leagues of black beneath her. There are things in there that we don't know about that are going to get you, girl. Get out of the water. Oh my God, that made me so uncomfortable and nervous. And I know that this isn't even like a water monster story. And I was like, oh my God.
Well, and Cassie, she is between mainland California and a just offshore island. There's no fathoms deep. There's no monsters coming out of there. It's pretty tranquil.
So, yeah, you know what? You can say that, but I still think there are monsters hiding beneath the water.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
I had a piece of writing I thought was really good. It's not necessarily like brilliant writing. It just captured like a sensation that I feel like I'm familiar with. And it's right after she realizes that, her diary page has been printed and is being disseminated. It says, Jane died inside a little, maybe a lot. It must have been death of a sort, for she suddenly felt separate from her body, yet she remained aware of the pain swelling in her chest. It was the pain that had driven her slightly out of her body. Her heart literally felt as if it would rupture. It's simple, but it to me accurately describes a moment of extreme humiliation, like the moment when it hits you that you are, at the center of mockery, and that, something has happened where your trust has been breached, like extensively. It's just like the pain in your chest, the overwhelming, the sense of disassociation. I've felt that in my life before. And it's like a horrible, horrible feeling. And so when I read that, it kind of just like, it stuck out to me and definitely, reminded me of some not great moments in my life. So
yeah, absolutely. And I have a follow-up to that line, which is, when you're our age, there's nothing worse than being humiliated.
Yeah.
Nothing. There's a lot. I mean, it's not just sexual shame. It's shame in this.
Mm-hmm.
Ringing your bell. Shame.
Yeah, shame. I have that GIF. I use that GIF often. I have a bunch here. One that I just love is Alice saying, "Let's die and put yourself out of my misery." I think that's just delightful and very, very mustache twirling villain. She couldn't die. If she died, she wouldn't be able to flip back to page 1 of her diary and rework the story. I like that. As the fire jumped onto the king-size bed, transforming it into a playpen for devils, Jane lifted Sharon out of the tub and turned the shower back on.
Yeah, that was interesting.
I like the playpen for devils. Like, there's a lot in here where you feel a better writer growing, and that's what's really interesting, reading a writer you like's early work. And, we mentioned Carrie. Reading Carrie, you see the dawn of King.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you see what will go on to become his staples. And, Pike is a very good writer often. And a lot of these early books, you see a little bit of like the surface has been scratched. And below it, you see that great writer, like this line. But if Alice wept, she did so in the privacy of her soul.
Mm-hmm.
That's just great. I was surprised by how many good lines I pulled, because the whole time I'm reading it, it's just like, okay, mediocre. Oh, this is really good. Mediocre.
Yeah.
And I only have one bad line. But before I get to that, I love this paragraph. It caught Jane Retton in the region between waking and sleep. Like many bad dreams, it came in darkness and had hidden within it a thing her heart sensed more than her eyes saw. From this thing emanated a scorching heat and a palpable intelligence that made her cringe in terror. It was aware, It had purpose. It made evil plans. And it was so close it could almost touch her. The only way to escape it, she knew, was to hold her breath, to play dead. Then maybe it would pass her by and go on to another victim. That's a rich passage.
Yeah.
And it's a rich passage that almost belongs in another book.
Yeah.
And would be improved so much if he hadn't referred to it as the thing. Give it a name. Come on, Pike, give it a name. Anyway.
Yeah, I guess for me it was just like the final line of the book, just because I was like, wait, that's it? Like, just, he set her in the car, brushed her hair from her eyes. But I know you, Jane. I've been up the whole night thinking about you. Like, is that supposed to be?
It's like he's starting a love story or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what is he in love with her now? Like, what?
Now, Gimme a Kiss 2 is her waking up in his trunk moments after this. And then it becomes like an audition type story, where it's he's just going to torture her for 2/3 of the book.
Yeah, I feel like it's supposed to be like a sweet line, like it's supposed to be like everything's okay now, and it just reads a lot differently, and also just like it doesn't feel like it wraps up any sort of like themes or interesting moments of the book or anything. Yeah,
indeed.
Just cuts to a face of her like in The Simpsons, and she's like, "I'm in danger."
Yeah, that's like one of my all-time favorite memes. I love that.
Same. Yeah, same.
So my bad line is complex because it may not be a bad Pike line. It may just be a bad Jane line because Jane wrote the line. I've been very naughty. I've gone and done what no girl should do. I've lost my virginity, and I know exactly where I lost it. But let me tell you, there's no getting it back. I wrote one of my many FFSs, for fuck's sake, next to that line.
No girl would ever write about losing her virginity that way. Get out of here.
So what you're saying, Cassie, is we've come upon the limits of Pike's young girl sexuality thoughts.
That ain't it. Yeah. That definitely ain't it.
I do have a surprise polyamory. Sharon smiled slyly. Didn't you once tell me that what was yours was mine? Remember when we were in kindergarten and I wanted to use your crayons? And then Jane says, oh, well, in that case, I'll share a sleeping bag with Kirk one night, and you can have him the next. Sound fair? Sharon says, I'll go along with that.
She's into it.
I mean, yeah, totally. Like Sharon would be up for it. She is. I'm always excited and always disappointed when non-monogamy is floated and then not followed through on.
Especially when then they get hit in the head with a poker and die.
Oh my God. Again, Sharon, most interesting character in the book.
R.I.P.
Just
Sharon.
brutally taken away. Brutally. So, and then I have, as usual, lines that aren't best or worst, but are just weird. Did anyone else find it weird that Jane told Sharon not to use her parents' bathroom when she has one in her bedroom?
Oh, I don't
Why
think
did she use the parents' one?
Yeah, specifically, she says, don't use my parents. My mom cleaned it spotless before she left. And then Sharon says, I'll use the one in your room. Like, why wouldn't she use the one in her room in the first place?
Once again, it's probably just to further the plot. Like, hey, go in my room and read my diary. Because, that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah. They could have just left that out, and then I would have only thought they had one bathroom.
I know.
Right.
Or I still would have wondered, why isn't there not a bathroom that's not in somebody's bedroom? Because all houses have bathrooms that are not in somebody's bedroom.
So if she had been like, oh, the one in the hallway's busted, use the one in my room, I would have been on board with that. That's totally understandable.
Yeah. And then there's this. Public demonstration of affection always made her uneasy, but not Kirk. He could make out on her parents' couch with her parents sitting on it.
Yeah, weird. And did that give you
Like,
flashbacks
all
to
right.
that one?
The orgasm, yeah,
Yes.
the orgasm in her parents' living room, yeah.
Oh, I remember that. What book was
That's
that?
that's from a story in Midnight Club.
Oh, I literally remember that because that was I think even the concept of like orgasms was still relatively new to me when I read that.
But you knew it wasn't something that you wanted to do around parents.
Exactly.
Even if you knew nothing else, you don't want to come around your parents.
Can that be a soundbite from this?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll make one of those little 15-second Instagram posts with it. Okay, let's move into the last act and give it out of 5 pikes. And Randall, you are very familiar with this kind of rating.
Yes.
You are welcome to jam something on one of the pikes or put something around, maybe add some scuba equipment, whatever you want to do. Out of 5 pikes, where do you put this?
I give this 2.5 pikes with with like a lifeguard ring over around one of the pikes, because hey, we're out at sea. So
now that you mentioned that, nobody threw a life ring in the water.
That's a good point.
They all just jumped in and started going wild.
They leap off this huge boat. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, 2.5. So, I it's an easy read. It's fun. It's got some good melodrama, some good teen melodrama in there, and some fun characterizations, and I thought, I think the general sort of like dynamic around Jane is pretty compelling. So yeah, I don't know, parts to like, but overall, I mean, definitely not one of the more gruesome pikes, which I think is the thing I always loved about Pike when I was young, was the really gruesome shit.
Except for the foot. You got the feet.
Yes, that was good. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Okay, Cassie, what do you got?
I'm going to give this one... I think I'm going to give it 2 pikes with half a box of condoms from your psych teacher as my rating.
But Cassie, are they real or are they just samples?
You know what? Who knows? You don't know till you open the box. It's a secret.
So it's Schrodinger's comic.
Yeah, condoms? Schrodinger's comic box. What?
Yeah. Schrodinger's comic box. Yeah.
It's not my favorite, but it was entertaining. Like Randall said, it was easy. It was entertaining. I think it would be kind of fun if it were like, a teen movie or something. Mm-hmm. I definitely think the crux of the plot really needs some work. I don't think it was good then. I don't think it's good now. Yeah. And I think it's a little bit insulting when you get through all of that and like Molotovs and stuff. And then she's just like, oh, I've got cold sores. It's like, come on. Like, so yeah, I'm going to go with 2.5, with the half being the condoms. And yeah.
So I'm in a tough position because I liked it more than the Midnight Club. And I liked it more than Slumber Party, which were my 2 lowest ratings, 2.5 and 3. But I don't feel like it really deserves 3. But I'm going to give it 3. But those 3 are submerged in water. So they don't count as much because they're not as high. So the water level's high there on the 3. Yeah. That's where I'm at with this. Becca, what do you think?
We didn't talk about the bunny and the cat, the Easter bunny versus the cat fight in the beginning, which was used.
No, we didn't. And
right.
now, you know what? Out of nowhere, you explained to me why the fuck the bunny's named Easter.
I mean, because it's a bunny.
Yes, I understand now, and I feel stupid now. This is like Cassie's "Give Me a Kiss" realization.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to like.
Oh my god, she was so deadpan. Well, it's a bunny.
I mean, it made sense to me.
Oh my god.
I'm sorry. Okay. Not trying to shoot you down, Cooper.
No. I'm fine. I'm fine. No.
I'm sorry. I just didn't expect it. It was so flat. It's such a flat response.
I'm so sorry.
Oh,
okay.
Okay.
So
So you're right, Becca. We did not mention the cat versus
We
bunny
didn't.
fight
So
that weirdly leads the book.
right. So basically, yeah, it's something they mentioned that really bring back again. So I'm gonna give it 3 Easter bunnies. So
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So
Oh,
no
that's how
fight,
that. Okay.
just bunnies.
Because I like bunnies. I was gonna say because I'm cute, but because I like bunnies.
Bunnies are cute.
I mean, you are cute.
Thank
It is
you.
not cute to say you're cute, though. So
Yeah.
we can say it, though.
Okay.
Unless you're a bunny.
Yeah, I
wish-
mean, if a
I
bunny
wish I
can
was a
say it's
bunny.
cute, that's also not cute because that's a talking bunny.
That might. Yeah, that's kind of creepy. I'm
That's kinda
actually.
cute.
I have
What?
Okay.
I have a fear of the Easter bunny, like straight up, guys. So, like the man
Well,
in a
often
costume.
they're terrifying.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't really like Easter bunnies that much, but this is like a little fluffy Easter bunny, okay?
It's a bunny named Easter.
Yes.
So it's different.
So it wasn't the greatest book, I will admit that. However, it is really short. I mean, they're all pretty short, but this one like felt short.
It is very short.
Yes, and like I was flipping pages, like what's gonna happen next? The one thing that let me down the most was the cold sore thing, kind of like Cassie said, like that was our fucking ending, like that. So, other than that though, like it was like you know how last time what was our last book? I don't even remember. Slumber Party.
Slumber Party.
And Cassie was like going on like, yeah, I liked like not knowing what was going on, and like I felt that way about this book. Like it was a thriller, and I'm like, who done it? And I was like really excited. So I'm just rambling right now, but my whole point of the thing is this gets 3 Easter bunnies, the cute fluffy kind.
3 Easter bunnies. Okay.
Since we didn't mention the bunnies, I just want to say this one thing. She referenced that she had a previous bunny that was killed by a cat in the yard, and then she lets this new bunny, Easter, run around in the yard again.
I was concerned about
You're
that too.
so dumb.
Yeah.
Like she doesn't deserve
Also,
to have a bunny.
Who lets their bunny
I've
out?
had bunnies. You don't let the bunny run in the yard because the bunny is going to tunnel out under whatever is.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Bunnies are not outdoor pets
Right.
unless they're in a cage outdoors. They are not outdoor pets.
I don't even let my dogs outside by themselves because I'm afraid a giant bird will come and swoop away with my dog. Like, I'm not
Aw.
kidding. Like, I have this fear. And so just when she was talking about the bunny roaming on its own, I was like, the birds are going to get it. And then a cat almost got it. And I was like, no.
And then an eagle swooped down.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then, so there was another thing too, where she's like, she had an ominous feeling thinking about the red dots of blood. And she's
Yeah.
like, but I couldn't find where the blood was coming from. And it seemed fine. I thought we were going to come back to that
Right.
somehow and be like, oh my God, there was actually she gets back and the bunny's dead in its cage because it was punctured.
I
say
but
I'm-
there's nothing.
I
I'm
really
glad
thought
that
there'd be
didn't
more.
happen.
Yes,
No,
I'm
me
glad
too.
that didn't
Same.
happen too.
Same. I forgot to mention all of this because I had a
Right,
lot
me
of
too.
thoughts on the bunny scene. Thanks,
I
Becca.
truly thought there'd be more of a point to the cat and the bunny fiasco.
Yeah.
Yes, other than just a distraction
Right.
that
Yeah.
literally
What
didn't
a-
have to happen.
What a weird distraction. Like that's what he
Yeah.
went with. Like okay.
Because
Like
you
the
know what?
doorbell could have just rang and then she could have
Yeah.
gone to answer the door and then she's out of her room. Like, what's all
Right.
this?
I often feel when I'm reading some of these earlier books, like I'm the executive at the film company that's making an adaptation and being just like, why don't you just omit the bunny thing? Because it doesn't really serve the plot. Yeah. Okay, Randall,
Yeah.
it's been wonderful having
Yeah,
you.
this was fun.
Tell us and our listeners where they can find more of you, especially the Losers Club.
Yeah, I'm a co-host of the Losers Club, a Stephen King podcast. We do episodes every week. We cover Stephen King books chronologically, but we basically cover everything in King's universe, all the movies, all the TV shows, all the crazy things. It's a very far-ranging podcast, and we have a lot of fun. You can find us at Losers Club Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and you can find me at Randall Colburn, just my name, and on Twitter and Instagram as well. And and you can also read my work at the AV Club. I am an editor there, and I publish several articles every day because that's how the news cycle rolls. So it's fun, and I think that's a good summation of it all.
Excellent. Becca, where can we find you
Yes.
online?
I have a blog that is astoldbybex.wordpress.com where I talk about books and all things spooky. You can find me on Twitter at astoldbybex and Instagram at readwithbex.
Cassie, how about you?
My blog is letsgetgalactic.com, and I also have an Etsy shop where I sell art and resin products and books. That's letsgetgalacticart.etsy.com. And then you can find me on social media on Twitter at ControlAltCassie, so CTRLALTCassie. And my username is the same on Instagram for my personal account. And then if you're looking for more bookish stuff, it's at Reading in a Prism.
And am I mistaken, or did you just release another book?
I did, yeah. It's my third one in the last couple months. So this is a tarot journal.
Like,
so
since we've been podcasting, you've released 3, I think.
I like staying busy. Look, this year's been rough. I got to keep myself busy. But yeah, so the first one was a horror author's coloring book made with the horror community, the indie community online in mind. And then the second book is a self-love workbook and 12-month planner for boss witches. So it's got like some tarot stuff, some witchy stuff in there. And then the third one, the most recent one, is a daily tarot journal. So it's a 6-month book where you can, reflect on a daily card every single day and learn about your deck and yourself.
Awesome. If you need more rainbows in your life, Cassie's social media is the way to go, because
it's true. I am the rainbow specialist.
It is wonderful. It is what drew me to you in the first place, Cassie.
Well, good. I'm glad it's doing its job.
Seeing the rainbow hair. It's just like, I want to talk to that person.
Rich says that, or my boyfriend, he says that people don't get me because I'm like a poison dart frog, because I'm really colorful and pretty, but I'm very like prickly as a person.
Yeah. The brightest color animals are usually the most venomous.
Yeah, it's a warning.
Okay, you can find me pretty much everywhere at Cooper S. Beckett. My website is coopersbeckett.com. I'm just going out on a limb because I've said maybe in the past few episodes, but I'm just going to say it. My audiobook version of As Good As Gone is out right now, and you can buy it at my website, coopersbeckett.com. Boom!
Woo,
it's
yay!
out. And as of 12/10, it better fucking be at this point. So, If you like less angry with your social media, don't follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram, because it is far less angry. Anyway, Cassie, why don't you tell us about where we can find more of the PikeCast?
So the show is available on, we have accounts on all social media. You can find us on Twitter, on Instagram. You can even find us on TikTok, although we haven't been using that too much. We're at the PikeCast. It's very simple, all one word. You can also find us on Goodreads. We have a Read with the PikeCast group where we log our books and you can chat with us about them. And then if you are a patron for our Patreon, you can help support the show and get exclusive access to our Discord, which is a patron exclusive sort of fun little community where we get to talk about each of the books and just a bunch of other random stuff too. And you also get some really cool stuff like personalized bookmarks, t-shirts, stickers, lots of goodies depending on your tier. And you get a digital version of my coloring book as well as a digital version of Cooper's books. So it's pretty cool.
And it's likely that the higher tiers of our patrons will receive my As Good As Gone audiobook, because I can do that once it's finished, and I really want it to be finished. It's driving me crazy. Crazy. Okay, so listeners, your homework for next time is The Last Vampire. Now, we know this is a series, but we are hitting The Last Vampire, book 1. And we're not going to do the whole series right now. We're just doing book 1. So you don't have to read ahead, just Last Vampire. And
I love that reaction.
What?
I just loved his reaction. Oh, shit.
Well, that's like, to me, that was always like Pike's Dark Tower, that was his, that was his big series. And I read all of those when I was young and I loved them. Yeah. Those are some of my favorites.
You're going to have to come back for one of the other books.
I'd love to, anytime.
It's one I haven't read. And speaking of coming back, we are really excited because Nat Edwards is going to be rejoining us.
Yay!
To talk about The Last Vampire.
We love Nat.
Yes,
and Randall, after this episode, we should talk about what books are still outstanding, so you can choose one.
Yeah, I'd love
come
that.
back.
Yeah, let's,
because they're all getting just snatched up, and everyone's like, "Oh, you already did Monster."
Yeah, exactly.
That is the one that everybody wanted to do, and we've already done it so early in the series.
Pick one of my faves.
Some outstanding, and right now we are working to get Grady Hendrix nailed down
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
to talk to
He
us
actually-
about Remember Me.
He just confirmed today the date, so we actually
he
have
did?
Grady Hendrix. Yeah,
Woo!
he's going to be on the show in
confirmed
April. Yes.
our discussion with Grady Hendrix.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome.
very
awesome.
exciting.
Anyway, thank you again, Randall. It has been awesome talking to you, and you are welcome on the PikeCast anytime
Yeah.
you want.
Yes.
Thank you so much. This was a blast.
We will talk to you soon, and listeners, pleasant dreams.
Woo!
You survived the night, friends. You can peek out from under your covers and see the first blues of dawn out the window. Thanks for spending the night with the PikeCast, and we hope you'll join us again next time. Until then, Pikers, pleasant dreams.
Yes. So,
Yes.
I'm sorry. I was trying to open a Wikipedia page to find out how many books he wrote this year, and my computer's being a bitch.
Oh, I think this is the third book. Yeah, there was and putting them into mine because I never been scuba diving in my life. So
In your book, were the vampires the ones doing the scuba diving?
I hope
okay,
so.
they were going.
I know, me
too. Well, the main characters who were all like cool teens were going scuba diving to explore like an old ship, and then a mystery figure who you don't know who it was stole a spear gun from the scuba store, and then shot one of their tanks with the spear gun. And then I can't remember because this is something I haven't looked at in 20 years. I don't think the vampire was the one scuba diving, but I can't be sure.
It's
Because
not-
that does come down to whether vampires breathe or not.
Right. I was going to
Because
say they could go deep because they're so
Right.
indestructible, and they
Yeah.
don't need the air tank. They are the
Yeah.
best scuba divers naturally.
I mean,
Well,
And I
that's good to
don't think
know.
I've ever seen a story that has vampires underwater.
No.
Honestly, I think we've hit on something.
You got to
Randall,
do
I
this,
think,
Randall.
I gotta
Go
dust
back.
off.
Yeah.
I gotta
Yeah.
dust off this draft.
Yeah.
The way you were
20
describing it too, it kind of sounds like a Pike book. Like there's a
Yeah, it
mystery
does.
figure who like shoots them, and I'm like, whoa, this is totally Pike. Write this.
Oh yeah. Well, these were my primary inspirations. Yeah, were like Christopher Pike books when I was writing when I was young. Yeah.
I don't think 20 years is too late to go back and edit the book, my dude.
No,
I still
no,
have
we're
it.
here
It's
for it.
it's all handwritten, and I still
I don't
have
know.
the
Oh,
draft of
nice.
it. Yeah.
Becca, as someone who has tried to go back to a book 20 years later, you're better off just vaguely remembering the plot and writing a new book, because trying to edit something that's that far removed, it's just like, wow, what the fuck was I doing?
Mhm.
Who thought? Why did I think I could write? No, it's terrible.
In the new version, the vampires should scuba dive.
Yes. I definitely encourage this. Please.
Yes, we will read
Vampire
it.
Yeah.
scuba.
And then we'll talk about it. It'll be fun.
Yes.
Vampire
Vampires
scuba.
from the deep.
Yes.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was basically like I was riffing on it was Christopher Pike meets like Anne Rice basically. Like I even named the main vampire Lewis. So
Oh my gosh.
my.
I know, and I made him look just like Brad Pitt too. So
Oh my god, I love this. How old were you?
probably like 12,
This is
13.
amazing.
Yeah.
This is so good.
I am so excited to
Yeah.
read this new bestseller. Like,
I know.
Yeah.
I wrote another one before that when I was in 6th grade. I wrote a book that was called Death in the Making, which is such a horrible title. And it was basically a Jurassic Park, but instead of dinosaurs, there were monsters on the island. And one of the monsters was the alien from Alien.
that's so cute.
So they bred them in captivity like monsters?
I don't think I got into that.
Oh, okay, fair. That's fair. I'm
There
so
was-
interested in these stories, man.
There was
Jesse,
just
these
an
are
alien
good
there.
questions you're asking, but there are no answers.
Well,
That's
there was
fair.
like that first one was inspired by me playing with like my action figures, so they all looked like my action figures, and one of them was Casey Jones from like the Ninja Turtles movies.
Yeah.
So I had him like wearing the same mask that Casey
Oh
Jones
my
wears.
god.
Yeah, it made no sense, but
love it.
I still have my hard copy of that one too. Like, do you guys know what Mortified is? Like, where people read like old diary entries and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've done that with my book I wrote in 6th grade. So, like, I've read sections of it. It's really fun.
Oh
You know,
my
I feel like Randall, I can't let you just be on this island alone. I wrote a book. I'm going to use quotes around book that did end up in the school library
Oh my
in
God.
sixth grade, called "They Went Back in Time," and I don't know why it was called that because there was no time travel in the book. There was dimensional travel, and they ran into clowns that looked just like the clowns in Killer Clowns from Outer Space,
Oh.
and that is literally the line that I used to describe them.
Oh, that's so funny.
An Audrey 2 rip-off plant and some sort of weird snake.
Oh man.
But it doesn't compare to my book Slime Molds, which was basically the exact same plot as Tremors, but it was about an underground blob.
Oh my God.
Oh man.
This is
So-
amazing.
So but like you showed it to a teacher and they put it in the library?
Yeah, it was a thing that they were doing in that school where the class would write something, write stories, and the top 3 from the class would get bound because they had the fancy binder and stuff and put in the library. Yeah.
I'm so jealous.
I wonder if it's still there, honestly.
I showed one teacher my 6th grade book, and which was like 125 handwritten pages. And
holy crap!
Yeah,
Wow.
and they read like 10 pages, and then like said, "Oh, this is great, honey," you know, and then never spoke of it again.
Okay, dear.
My vampire book was 375 pages. It was.
Oh my
God.
gosh.
Yeah, it was a mess. I tried to rewrite it when I was in high school, but I don't know. It got insane. So I don't think I ever finished it. Yeah. So, anyways.
Well, now you have at least 2, probably 3. I'd buy it. People who would buy your Vampires from the Deep.
Oh
book.
Man, I should just self-publish it and see what happens.
We should just all self-publish our old books and don't change a thing about them.
Change a thing about it.
Yeah.
I was
just
gonna say, you guys are all of yours are so creative with like creatures and monsters and stuff. And like I've told you before, but like the first thing I wrote was because I was mad at my little best friend in 5th grade, and it was called The Best Friend Feud Fight. And she got mad and was like, she dies in the book, and then she got so mad at me, and she's like, feud and fight are the same word. This is stupid. And she threw it on the floor, and I was so upset.
That is, I love
She
Feud
did
Fight.
die.
Feud Fight is
Feud
so
Fight.
funny.
Yeah.
Feud
and it
Fight should just be a title of a book, just by itself.
I know. It's just gold, right? And so my story, it was because I was mad at her because we were in 5th grade, we would play house during recess, and it was me and 2 other girls. We all had the same crush on the same little boy. And so he would get to be the husband, the dad. And so we would take turns being the mother, like the wife. And it's not, we wouldn't do anything weird, but we were just like, oh, we have house. Everybody else is our babies now. And like, it sounds crazy now, but this is what I did in 5th grade.
Cassie,
and
we were all children at one point, so don't
well, because
worry
sometimes
about
I tell these stories. I'm like, you remember you used to like hang lizards from your ears, and my boyfriend's looking at me like, what the fuck are you talking about? And I'm like, because they bite onto your ears. And he's like, this is a weird Florida thing, Cassie. Don't tell other people about it.
Okay, yeah, Cassie, I'm not with you on that one.
Yeah,
I don't
okay.
know that one.
Well, so we would play house, and I got mad because they skipped my turn because I was sick. I was out sick, and they're like, well, that was your day. And I was like, no, I'm going to be the mother today. And they were like, no, you were sick. And I was like, I was enraged. I was so furious. And I went back into class from recess early, and I wrote a story about the school burning down, and the girl who got to play the mother, my best friend, she was inside the school, and she burnt to death, and she melted into a pile that was like Alex Mack. Like, did you ever watch that, The Secret World of Alex Mack? She melted into a silver pile. I don't know why. A puddle. Yeah. And my teacher had to, like, I got in trouble. It wasn't.
Yeah. Did your parents get called?
So my mom, the teacher talked to my mom, but I was a little bit of a troublemaker, so she had to talk to her about some other stuff too. And so that was kind of, that wasn't that wasn't really the big part there, but she did mention it. My mom, though, she was just like, if you're going to write stories about people dying, maybe don't make them people you know. And I was like, okay, that's fair. That's totally fair. I won't do that again. Yeah.
So if you want to know more about any of our 6th through junior high, through high school stories, hit us up at the PikeCast. But now we should go back to the plot of Gimme a Kiss. Don't be sorry. I did it too. No, we went there. We all went there.